Startup Summit yesterday by hosting esteemed dignitaries, eminent guests, and learned speakers who shared their thoughts and perceptions on various topics with us. Carrying forward the knowledge and insights from yesterday, I hope you are all geared up for an excellent session on the day 2 of our summit. We have an amazing line of speakers today who are experts in their fields and will be sharing their stories and ideas. We also have a panel discussion with some renowned startup entrepreneurs. We are highly privileged to have them as a part of the summit. In order to ensure that we have an insightful summit and a turbulence-free session, let us ensure that we follow certain ground rules. Vignesh, if you can just project them on screen. Okay, I'll just go ahead. All participants are requested to keep their audios on mute. Any questions that you have to the speakers or for the panel, that can be typed in the chat box and they will be taken up separately. 2 hours of structured CPE for the Doha chapter members, and please join the session using your membership number and name for easy identification. So I recently came across a quote that applies to our topic of discussion today, startups. It says, big businesses always start small. On this note, I would request our chapter chairperson, CA Nirlab Bhatt, to kickstart today's summit.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, CA Priya, for chipping in and also for starting on a very warm note. So our first esteemed speaker of the evening and highly renowned C-suite executive, Mr. Varun Sridhar, current and future sponsors, esteemed invitees, and dear members, good evening once again. With an immense pleasure, I welcome all of you on the second day to this one of its kind thematic events of the term. Feeling gratified to inform that yesterday we had more than 150 members join this power-packed evening, which was full of inspiration, wisdom, and learning from the esteemed dignitaries and speakers. The current situation demands innovation, diversification, channelization of liquidity, and employment generation. In startup parlance, ROI stands for return on innovation, as idea and innovation are your initial capital on which you can bank upon. We'll be privileged to have highly successful entrepreneurs, founders, investors, and startup mentors on one platform today. These are the leaders who are truly business titans and industry captains in India and Qatar. And I thank each one of them. We are grateful to the event sponsor, Solution ERP WLL, for their generous support. We also welcome and thank the attendees who are watching us live on the YouTube from different corners of the world. Let's have an enriching and exciting learning experience. Friends, before we move further, there is a change in the agenda. Our scheduled presenter, CA Aniket Talati, Central Council member, will not be able to attend today, being infected with COVID-19. And we'll be having Mr. Anirudh Damani, 4th generation entrepreneur and one of the biggest angel investors of India. He will be sharing his perspective on wealth creation by investing in startups. Wow, what a topic. It gives me goosebumps. We are thankful to him for accommodating our last minute request and be ready for the session. Friends, now we have the honor to have amongst us first technical speaker of the evening, Mr. Varun Sridhar, CEO of Paytm Money, which is Paytm Money is a household name in India. He currently leads Paytm Money, the biggest digital wealth management platform in India. So we have amongst us a truly business titan from India. He brings years of valuable experience of leading the digital transformation journey of some of the top retail banks in India and abroad. He has served as the CEO of FinShell India, where he launched Real Mein Paisa, a fintech platform on mobile. He was with BNP Paribas for close to 8 years, where amongst other assignments, he supported the acquisition of Sharekhan. And he has been associated with various other brands also, including Deutsche Bank and Citibank. Now, this is very, very brief introduction of Mr. Varun Sridhar. I'm sure the Google is full of his accolades and his achievements. So help me welcome with virtual round of applause, Mr. Varun Sridhar, an industry captains of India. And a namaskar and greetings, sir. E-greeting from this beautiful country, Doha. Screen is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, good evening to everyone. I'll try and keep this for about 30 minutes. And, organizers, I tend to speak more than required. Okay, so you should, at one moment, tell me, Varun, time ho raha hai, and I should recognize and acknowledge that. But I think, I'm very happy to be here. There are two reasons. When I got the mail for the invite, I accepted. One, I've traveled to about 55 countries, and Qatar is one of them I've never set my foot on. Right, even though I lived in Dubai and I've been to the whole of Middle East, somehow Qatar I had planned 2 times, and every time my boss sent me somewhere else, right? And so my life, never ended up being in Qatar, and that's one of the things I plan to change. And that's why when I got this invite, I said, now at least I will know 50, 60 people in Qatar, and so when I arrive, I know who to contact, right? So at least I can have a nice cup of tea and a shisha. So, with that note, that's the reason one, I accept this. And reason two is my very old association with the Chartered Accountants Institute. I'm a CA foundation. I did my training, and 1 week before my inter exam, I gave up, right? And, I cleared all my attempts in one go, and my father slapped me for it. But, that's going to be the interesting story on why he did it and, what's the future. But good evening. I'll try and take 15 minutes to walk you through my journey. I'll try and go fast. If it's a bit you're not able to understand, please feel free to type. You have questions, feel free to type, and we'll keep this easy. In the latter 15 minutes of my presentation, we'll talk a bit about Paytm Money and the wealth management platform that I'm building together with Paytm. And I think it'll be interesting for some of you to know how the wealth business in India is changing and what's happening, right? So these are the two things I thought I would talk about. But let's start. So I'm Tam, a Tamilian, born in Hyderabad, brought up in Delhi. I think then I moved to about 50 countries, 10 countries I worked in. So, when somebody asks me where you're from, I honestly don't know anymore, right? And I'm, I speak a bit of Arabic, a bit of French, a bit of Italian, obviously Hindi, English, Tamil. So, I got a bit mixed. And one of the reasons I got mixed was my father was a professor in finance. And he used to teach this school in India, which is called MDI Gurgaon. So he founded the school. He was the first professor there. He was a professor of corporate and project finance. And so, at my home, all my life, I've been born to teachers, and I started learning finance. So for sure, when I was graduating, I think I was about 16 when I bought my first stock. And the reason I bought my first stock was one of my uncles. He's a banker. He was staying at Oberoi Hotel in Delhi, and he invited me at 16 to come spend a day in the hotel. And he said, Varun, jitna bhi khana hai khao, I will take care of the bill later. So I was like, dude, this guy is cool. So later in the evening when he came, I had spent a lot of money. But 16-year-old, how much money can you spend, right? So I just ordered some chocolates. I don't know, some in-room dining, and that's it. And then at the evening, I asked him, I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a banker. I work for Amex. And, that day I was very sure that finance would be my life, right? Next day, I ended up buying a stock. And the stock I bought was IDBI Bank, not a good choice. So I'm not a good person you can ask saying, where to invest, because that's not what I do well. But I think, I started my journey there. When I was 18, everybody in India forced me into saying, Varun, you have to do either a chartered accountant or a doctor or an engineer, or IAS. There are limited options, but I said, okay. So I got into CA Foundation and I did my BCom honors. I think I almost got a very, very good score, very close to getting a rank, but not a rank, right? And then I did my stipend training, and I was really loving my CA when 1 week before my inter exam, there was college elections happening. So one of the girls in college, she said, Varun, all these people who are contesting college elections, they are not, so they're not intelligent. They don't know how to speak proper English. What the hell are they doing there, right? And she said, we must change Indian politics and Indian governance. And if there is the way, it's student union elections in Delhi University. So I did it, and I ended up, contesting for elections, and I eventually won. But right before doing all that, I gave up my CA, right? So for all of you chartered accountants, I decided not to be a CA that day, because I said, I reflected on 2 years of my life back, and I said, this is not who I want to be, right? And, why did I do that? I don't know, right? Maybe it's young energy, whatever. But that was the first big decision I took in my life. Right. And I said, you know what, I'm meant for different things. I'm meant to maybe do sales, marketing, whatever. And so my life started. My first banking job was in Citibank. I was a salesperson on a bike in Cochin selling. I used to wear a blue jacket and sell credit cards, personal loans. Right. So next time somebody calls you on Truecaller or one of those things, please don't block the phone, because 10 years later, that person may be talking to you. Right. And, maybe telling you about startups and the energy there. Right. So, so I did sales for a bit in Citibank. Then I moved to Deutsche Bank, where I discovered what my strength was. And my strength was doing 0 to 1, right? So I worked in Deutsche Bank. We launched the retail bank in India, the lending business. And in a startup, you don't know what you do. So you come in the morning and you think you're going to do a product job, but you end up serving tea, coffee to 20 people. You make presentations, you do FSDs for tech, you do data analytics, you do business plans, you do future cash flow forecasting, you learn how to execute a trial balance, you learn everything, right? And so for 2 years, I remember I think I never had a weekend. I slept in office many, many times, right? On the conference room table. It's an art, right? And I know chartered accountants also go through the same phase in March or whenever, the year closing happens. It's tough. But I used to go through that every day for 2 years. And then I decided my life is about startups. And somewhere at the end of 2008, I left Deutsche Bank. I went to do my MBA. And day one of my MBA, I wanted to be an investment banker, by the way, right? I was this retail sales guy. That's what I was. And I still am. And I think I wanted to be this hotshot investment banker, wearing a nice jacket, suit like Leonardo DiCaprio, and going into a meeting room in New York or wherever you want me to be, right? Or the Qatar Financial Authority, right? I think I've seen their offices. That's also very cool, right? But so I wanted to go there and I wanted to do all this. But day one of my business school, Lehman Brothers collapsed, right? And my college dean, he came in and he said, Varun, this is all not going to work because, you're a finance guy who wants to go back. And I said, oh, that's the story. So it didn't work for me. But I held on, and 2008, 2009 was the worst crisis. We all think COVID is bad. I know COVID is physically bad, emergency, medical, all that is bad. But COVID is not a crisis economically in as big a way as it was in 2008, 2009, at least for me, right? And so I said, look, I started to realize, and during my crisis, I got my internship with a great difficulty in Dubai. So I have a very special attachment to Middle East, because the one city that decided to give Varun a chance when nobody else in the world did. So Europe kicked me out. Okay, India wasn't willing to welcome me because they said, yeah, aap MBA Italy mein karke aa rahe ho, and all these Italian MBAs. In Italy, you don't do MBA. You either do fashion or you drink coffee, right? What the hell are you doing with an MBA? Or you make pasta or pizza. But you can't do an MBA in Italy. And I said, dude, I studied in the best school, and the school is now ranked 20th in the world, but why wouldn't you recognize me? But they didn't. So India didn't welcome me back, and Middle East and Europe didn't, and America didn't. So Middle East was the place where I found my homecoming. And so I started my life in Dubai. I did my first job there. I was a management consultant running around Dubai. I worked in Egypt, which was my first big job. And at 31, I became the head of retail banking for a bank in Egypt with a scale of about 2,000 people. I think that was my moment. The reason that moment happened is because I was there in Middle East and I started to understand how business is done. And then the revolution had also happened at the same time. So that was the second big crisis of my life, where BNP Paribas Bank was burnt. The whole country was burning and 800 people died. And somebody next to me died. And everybody was being shot at, right? But I was Indian, so I was brown skin and I spoke Arabic. Okay, so it was the single best situation to be in. Because whenever somebody would ask me your passport, I would say I speak back in Arabic and say he's Egyptian, let him go. He's not a foreigner, so let's not kidnap him, right? And that happened to me in Egypt. I ended up joining BNP Paribas there. I worked with BNP Paribas for 8 long years. And I'll just give you an example of a few projects I did. And by then I knew that I wanted to do startups, right? That was my thing. So I knew that my strength was doing 0 to 1. I figured that I'm not so good at running very large scale boring companies, but I figured that my CA gave me finance strength, my life, and the fact that I travel like crazy and I do a bunch of other things personally gave me the ability to take risk. And slowly I started to figure how to master risk, right? So I'll give you an example of my 8 years in BNP Paribas. So I ran this bank in Egypt. 3 months into running the bank, they told me sell the bank. So I sold the bank to Emirates NBD in Egypt. So that's how Emirates NBD, His Excellency of Dubai, I'll never forget that. He said, Varun, you tell me what you want as a check to stay back. We like you. And he said, you're welcome to the Royal Palace of Dubai. I didn't accept that invite and I still regret it. Right? I hope you can get me that invite again sometime in Qatar. But, that was a very strange moment for me. But I ended up selling a bank when I was 32, which was fantastic for me. I got promoted and I went to Europe. I was deputy head of 16 banks. If you've seen Die Hard, a movie, there's Bruce Willis. So I was a Bruce Willis for my boss. So I would go into a country with the toughest project when nothing was there, everything was wrong, and I had to fix it. And I'll give you a few examples. So I launched a digital bank in Europe, which is called Hello Bank. And when I say I don't mean Varun as an individual, but I mean a bunch of people who got together. So by then, I also started realizing that if you want to run great startups, you need to be able to get people together, right? Because you can't do everything yourself. And that skill started to come to me. So we launched this huge digital bank in Europe. It was called Hello Bank. I also went on to support another team in China, launch a digital bank. Then we were running to San Francisco, where a bank was being restructured. When Russia took over Crimea in Ukraine, we had a very large bank. We had to do cost restructuring of the bank. So I did that. In Turkey, we launched a business, and I was running a business in Morocco. Right. So I was essentially a pilot, air hostess, as you may want to call me, with a mandate saying, do the most difficult job and fix it. Right. So while I was doing that for about 3-4 years, I was living in Paris and I was traveling. And one day I got very bored and I put my hand up in a very large town hall and I said, hey, we should do something about India. And eventually I ended up coming back to India because Mr. Modi was running around, and I felt, having lived in Europe for a bit, having lived in the Middle East for a bit, I felt, what Mr. Modi was trying to sell was a good dream. Right. And I bought the dream. I'm one of the people who returned back from Paris from a very nice French contract, very large job. My team was about 40,000 people. Okay, just to give you a feeling. Right. And my boss was the boss of everything. And so I was his one down. So it's kind of cool. But I came back to India to buy this company called Sharekhan, which was a digital broker. I bought it and I was on the board of that company. And 2019, I quit BNP Paribas after 8 long years for one very simple reason, that I had run this startup for them. And somebody from Paris called and told me, Varun, the startup of yours, we have to close. We have to fire all these 100 people. And you come back to Paris and we have a very nice CEO job waiting for you. So it's the time I took another big decision in my life after leaving chartered accountancy. I said, I must leave BNP Paribas, right? Because they don't value me and they don't understand India the way I do. So I took my team and myself, and it was my first true entrepreneurial venture, because now I was fired, technically speaking, right? When you tell your boss, I don't agree with you, you're fired, okay, at my level. So I was fired technically. I told him I need 6 months time. If you can, I'll find my home. So I went and sold our company to Oppo Group, and Oppo is Oppo, Realme, OnePlus, and Vivo. So I sold ourselves to them, and we were running the financial services business. The business went very well. In 12 months' time, we were almost close to break even. Again, another startup, fintech. That's all I've been doing. And funnily, when we ran the startup, I told them, I said, look, we have an agreement. I left the French for a reason. If I'm joining the Chinese, I'm happy, but you need to understand India. You need to understand my country, and you need to understand how this works. Right. And then I'm happy to have this conversation. So we had this nice conversation, and 12 months into it, they changed their mind on the business plan, and it had nothing to do with COVID. Okay. So it was pre-COVID that they changed the business plan. Right. And when they changed the business plan, I said, look, this is not me. Right. I didn't join for this. If I left BNP Paribas and I left the French, at least the French were serving champagne and oysters. Right. By the way, in all of this, I changed completely from being a vegetarian to eating everything that moves except humans. Okay. So while I did that big change, and I think it's so important when you run a startup, and this is a startup seminar, that I ended up eventually one day getting a call from a very important man in India. His name is Vijay Shekhar Sharma. I know him since 2014. He knows me for the last 12 months, right? And I've been his fanboy all through. If there is one man who's changed India, QR codes all over, mobile payments all over, technology in digital, in fintech in India is so ahead, because one man from a 100 square feet room in Aligarh dreamt about a new India, and that India is there today, right? And as we speak, when he called me and said, hey, Varun, I have a job for you. I said, sir, I will take this offer, but I don't want a job. I want my own company. And so that's how I joined Paytm Money. I hope that story was a bit interesting for you. I'll just give 2 messages from that, which I have learned along the way, or 3 messages maybe. Message number 1 is crisis is a great opportunity. Okay, crisis is the single best time to do something. The most people in a crisis would be pessimistic. But if you look at startups, if you look at businesses, a crisis is when you can do a full U-turn, abandon everything and start fresh. But only 1% of people will do it, and 99% will sit along and watch how many COVID cases are happening today, right? Or what travel restrictions are happening, while 1% of the world will be working on what's next, right? And I think I learned that as an art way back in 2008. Then by 2014, I was practicing it. 2016, I think I started becoming an expert. 2019, I think I did my first true transaction in a crisis. So when COVID came and when Paytm called, I got my interview and my job on Zoom, right? So, CEOs don't find jobs on Zoom, but I did, right? And that can happen during a crisis, right? So I think that's message 1 I want to leave you from my career, if that means anything to anybody. The second message, I think the startups are great. Right, but it involves a bit of risk taking. It involves a bit of courage, but most importantly, it involves taking that very first step. Right, in the old Indian culture, they take the very first step. When you get married and you come home and you have to kick the thing, and then the guy has to do it, and all of that. There is a rationale, and I figured that great startups happen when somebody takes that first step. But also, you get a team along with you, right? You get a set of people, and those set of people are not necessarily people who like you. And I think that's a small difference, Mostly people will go with people who they feel comfortable having a coffee, who they can holiday with. But those are not the people who will tell you your idea is stupid or that you're spending too much money, right? So those are the two messages that I drew from my career. And the last one is travel is the best inspiration, right? So I think, grown in my life, in my career, professionally, every time I've traveled. So one of the reasons I think Paytm Money is doing so well is because very quickly I'm able to bring my Turkish experience, my Chinese experience, my American experience to India, right? It takes me 30 seconds to do that. Whereas for somebody else, you have to read a blog, and reading a blog is one thing, but living it is another, right? Like, I'm sure the way Qatar is developing, it's fantastic, right? I can almost tell you 20 years from today, I saw what happened 20 years or 2003 in Dubai and what it is today. And I think those journeys are happening, right? And those journeys, if you're able to see the future and come back, you're the guy who knows the fortune ball, right? You know how it looks like. So you're able to predict better. But that's my life. Very quickly, 7-8 minutes on Paytm Money, and then I have time till 9:33 my time. So that's about 10 more minutes from now. Paytm Money, who are we? Paytm is India's largest startup. We're valued at about $16 billion. But that's not important. I think what's important, I'll give you 3-4 statistics and some numbers so you understand the scale of operations. We did last month, in the month of March, 1.4 billion transactions. Okay, that's the number of transactions Paytm did, and we have only one app, right? So everything goes through that largely. There's a merchant app, but that's small, but everything goes to this main consumer app. And we did 1.4 billion transactions. What's even nicer is we did 99.8 to 9% success, which means that our transactions don't fail, which means the tech has been built for that kind of scale. Now, and we think that's just the start of India, right? We think the 1.4 billion will become maybe 10, 12 billion. But that's the scale of the company. We have about 580 million registered users and about 250 to 350 million monthly active users, right? So that's the scale of the company that we manage. We have 3 large business lines. Business line A is the payment business. We are India's largest payment company, right? So that's our moat. In any startup, the moat is important. A moat essentially means the reason why. Why do you live, right? What is the reason a user will come back to you? The second business that we run is e-commerce or digital businesses, where you have Paytm First Games. You have Paytm Mall, you have FASTag, you have multiple other Paytm Insider, which is a ticketing business, Paytm Travel, Paytm Bus, you have many, many businesses. The third business we have is financial services, which is where I belong. So there we have a bank, which is called Paytm Payments Bank, where we have about 60 million consumers who've done essentially, who live all their payment banking through an app. Then you have Paytm Money, which is the company I manage, and I'll talk about it in a bit more detail. And you have lending and insurance. So all of this together is founded by one man, whose name is Vijay Shekhar Sharma. Our investors are SoftBank, Ant Financial, Warren Buffett. I think the world's SEF partners, Elevation Capital. So we have globally maybe the best investor profile. As a company, we are India's biggest startup, but we are also going through a journey of breaking even, right? So we are a company that's invested heavily, built India, changed India. Now we are investing for the future. And while we're doing that, we're breaking even very soon, right? So if you read about us, you'll hear that that's Paytm's mission. What does Paytm Money do? Paytm made a mission very clear: 500 million Indians to be financially meaningfully included. My mission is simpler: 100 million Indians to manage their wealth on their own on a mobile phone. So I have 4 business lines. I'll walk you through it quickly. We are a startup. We are 2.5 years old. We are about 350 people. We have about 7 million users. Out of my 350 people, about 80% is tech and product, right? And 20% is other functions. We are a very, very digital company, which means in a country like India, where financial education, investment, management is not as advanced and as developed, we do everything digitally, right? So we don't understand the concept of sending somebody to you for a signature. We don't have branches. We have none of that, right? So my whole office during COVID works off laptops. We all keep traveling. My last headcount of 350 people is in 23 cities, right? I myself travel a lot. So we don't even have an office anymore. We're all working remotely, and that's India's largest digital wealth management company for you. I have 4 business lines. My business line 1 is the first one that went live. It's called digital mutual funds, right? What we do there essentially is you have regular mutual funds, which the banks were selling, where you pay 1% commission to the bank and 1% to the asset management company. We came to India 2.5 years back and said, why are you paying 1% to the bank? Don't pay it. We don't need that. So we launched direct mutual funds. We were not the first, but we were the first ones to shout across India and say, this is the right thing to do. Today, we have 7 million consumers and we process about 1.3 million transactions a month on SIP. What's nice is not none of those numbers. We're the India's largest SIP distributor, by the way, right? But that's not nice. What's really nice, what makes me happy, is I have at least one customer in 99% of all PIN codes in India. Just think about it for a second, right? And we've done it without any, any marketing. So I've never marketed myself till today, right? It's just naturally happened. That's my first business. My second business is the digital gold business. Very interesting. Indians love gold, you all know that, right? And India is the world's largest gold importing country and consumer. So we launched digital gold and everybody said, who will buy gold on an app, right? We said, hey, let's try. So what we did is we gave on the app in one click to buy 1 rupee gold to 1 crore or $150,000 of gold. You could buy it. It's pure 24 karat. You get real prices, 24 hours. If you want the delivery of the biscuit, it comes to your home. If you want to keep the gold for 5 years, cool. We launched all this on an app, made it very simple. And when everybody laughed about it and everybody said this won't work, as we look back in the last 2.5 years, we have 63 million consumers in India who bought gold on our app. Okay, so just to give you a feeling, 63 million people have bought digital gold. We've transacted 6,000 kilos of gold. And last Diwali, which is about 5 months back, we were bigger than the largest jeweler in India in 2 days of Diwali sales, right? And we have about 45% market share on digital gold in India, right? Which is not small. So that's my second business. My third business is NPS or pension planning. I have one request to make to chartered accountants. Please teach people that at 60, God will not help you. You need to plan your pension. In India, nobody plans for 60. Everybody plans, how will I make money next week, right? So nobody asks me, hey, Varun, where will I retire? Everybody says, give me a tip next week. I want to become very rich, right? And so we have a small business called NPS. We do it digitally. I'm not happy with it. People tell me, Varun, you're top 3 in India. It doesn't make me happy because it's very, very small. And our last business is stock trading, which I launched about 7 months back. A fantastic business. We've just launched it, right? And essentially, it's the first time Paytm has got into futures and options, derivatives, ETF, IPOs, all of that. We are very new. I think we're the youngest broker in India, so to speak. We've come into India and said, in India, pricing was at about 100 rupees an order before. Then a competitor came in, which is India's #1 broker today, and does it at 20 rupees. We came in and we said, we'll do it at 10 rupees and still make profits, right? And everybody asks me, Varun, how do you do it? And I say, hey, look, my team is only 350. My nearest competitor is running a team of 4,000 people. When I was managing Sher Khan, it was 6,000 people, right? So everything we do is tech-driven, and that allows us to be so nimble. And the profit, the cost saving I make, I pass it on, right? And I want to give you a few examples of what we managed to achieve. In the last 6 months, we now do about 2 million trades a month, which is very small. I have a market share of 0.5%, but for a company that's just started, that's not bad, right? Learning of the day, I think I learned 3 things from Paytm. I would love to share it with you in the last 2-3 minutes that I have, and I'll stop then and I'll give it back to the organizers. But I first learned when I met Vijay, or I met Vijay in my mind in 2014. Okay, and I want you to rewind yourself a bit. I met him, so I met him. So I think I keep dreaming all day long that I met all these people, right? So I met Vijay in 2014, and the reason I met Vijay is somebody came to BNP Paribas asking for money. So Paytm was asking for 5% stake back in 2014. Okay, back in 2014, maybe they were not even valued at $200 million. And BNP Paribas said, no, India, we don't know, Paytm, we don't understand. Why would we do it? Right? And I kept saying, no, this company is good, this man is good, he will do some magic. But nobody heard. My bad decision not to pursue. But I got to know this company that day. I learned that somebody has to dream. There has to be this 1, 2, 3 people who have to dream. So, as you all start thinking, I think the chartered accountant fraternity sees much more than anybody else. You see more businesses, more P&L than anybody else. But in my last, ICAI, I had this all India session, I think with some 10,000 odd chartered accountants. And I said, I wonder why chartered accountants are the least risk-taking people. Because they are supposed to be the owners of the truth. They are actually the most knowledgeable. So why are the best startups in India not run by chartered accountants, right? This always baffles me. But now that I meet younger chartered accountants, honestly, they are crazy, right? So they are going all out to do all these nice startups, right? Which is fantastic because I think that's great. But that's one thing I learned, that somebody has to have a vision. The second thing I learned is somebody needs to keep being relevant to a consumer. That Paytm has gone through this journey that every 6 months, consumer changes his habit. So I have to change the whole company, right? Like 12 months back, stockbroking was not as important as it is today. Today, everybody in India wants to do futures and options, right? And I think that's changing the game. So learning to be relevant is very important. And third, I had my last lesson from a very good Gujarati company, and they told me something very nice. They said, Varun, if you spend 1 rupee, you have to learn how to make 3, right? Because if you don't give 3 rupees back, then how will you sustain your employee? How will you sustain your investor? And how will you sustain your user? Right? And that's why, I always remember this 1:3 principle, and I kind of follow it in my life. But, it's been a pleasure. I would have loved to do this physically. I'm self-inviting myself to Qatar, whether you all invite me or not, right? And, I would love, when COVID is over, it's the only, I have 3 countries in my mind, which I've booked 2 times, but I've canceled, and Qatar is one of them. And, I'm definitely making it to Doha. I'm looking forward to it. But thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been my honor and pleasure.
Shall we give a big virtual round of applause to industry titans? Mr. Varun Sridhar, please. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Varun, I'm losing, my words in explaining that how inspired I am after listening to you. What an illustration career, sir. And we all are truly spellbound. That's all I can say. If I can take just one question, sir, and in a very brief way. Sir, when you took over the charge as the CEO, you had shared, you said, and I quote, that I'm thrilled to be part of the team that is responsible for introducing wealth management services to consumers in both India and Bharat and making meaningful financial inclusion simple. Sir, do you think that have you been able to bridge the gap between India and Bharat? What's your take, sir? Brief take, sir. If you can please enlighten.
Very good question. I think I was talking with a very, very important, top government official in India and a regulator a few days back. And they said, Varun, what do you think? You are the largest carrier. So I'll give you a number. 60% of all my users are first time to financial markets, right? So you just imagine that. And that's the amount of financial inclusion we are able to bring. But the fun is not that. So somebody asked me exactly like you did, saying, hey, Varun, do you think your mission is achieved? I said, sir, my mission will be achieved the day every Uber driver in India, every rickshaw puller in India, everybody who has to save whether 1 rupee or 100 rupees or a crore or $1 million, it doesn't matter the size of the money and how many zeros one has against his or her balance sheet. But if you are able to save that properly in a very simple way with the same rights that a rich HNI user has, right? Because HNI has advantage of information, advantage of professional bankers, chartered accountants, which give you that leverage, which give you that advantage to make more money. And I said, if Paytm can bring that advantage to the Uber driver, and the day every Uber driver is able to do what I'm going to tell you, right? So he's able to drive, and at the end of the drive, 5 rupees, he's able to auto save. And then with that same money that he has saved, he's able to go buy his vada pav in a stall in Bombay from his mutual fund account. And he's able to pay his school fees. I think that day we would have achieved our mission, right? And I think for India, that number is about 500 million people. And I'm at 7 million consumers. So I think I have a long, long, long journey to make. And I hope, before I retire, I'm 40, by the way. I think I have 20 more years to retirement, but I want to retire at about 50, right? So I have 10 more years because I want to travel after that. So I have 10 more years to maybe get 500 million Indian people to manage money on their own on a mobile phone, right? So yeah, very far from our mission.
Thank you, sir. We wish you all the best, and the way you are also at this level, also the way you are pushing the boundaries is inspirational. And on the last note, thank you very much. But also, we would like to welcome you somewhere in future in this beautiful country, either this year or our vice chair is also there, probably next year also, in a physical manner. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we also acknowledge and welcome the presence of very, very renowned Qatari entrepreneur, Mr. Ghanim Al Sulaiti. He is with us. Thank you, Mr. Ghanim Al Sulaiti, to be with us and to for agreeing to share your knowledge and success story with us. And now I will hand over the screen to our dynamic vice chair, C. Ankit Agrawal.
Thank you so much, CN Love, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. It is my honor to introduce the second speaker for the evening, whom I know personally and who is the biggest inspiration for me, Mr. Ghanem, founder and CEO of Inbaat Holdings Qatar. He is a young Qatari entrepreneur passionate about creating a positive impact on the society by promoting a plant-based lifestyle. He is a serial entrepreneur, founding his first business, Evergreen Organics, in 2016, and now has over 10 projects currently live or under development. He is the owner of series of vegan restaurants in Qatar, such as Evergreen Organics, Green and Go, MYLK, and Talatin. He is a founder of Botany, the Vegan Alchemist, a fully vegan and organic brand in Qatar. He is the owner of Paper Cut Factory, which design and manufacture eco-friendly packaging. He is on a mission to help and transform people's mindset to live a lifestyle that helps their planet, their health, and their future. He has worked extensively with the local school and regional organizations such as Qatar Foundation, Uridu, Doha Marathon, Qatar National Library, Qatar Financial Center, and Qatar Investment Authority. He holds a BSc in Civil Engineering from Drexel University, USA. Today, he is going to speak on cornerstones of startup success, innovations, and diversification. Can we have a big virtual round of applause to welcome our speaker for the evening, Mr. Ghanem Al Sulaiti? Over to you, sir, Mr. Ghanem Al Sulaiti.
Thank you so much. I'm very humbled and honored to be among all of you guys on this event. I'm very excited to share my message and a little bit about my journey. I'm quite interested to also hear the stories of the other entrepreneurs that were speaking before me, which was very inspiring. So thank you guys for that. So let me start this little conversation by introducing myself again. Thank you for the introduction, but let me maybe go a little bit deeper. So yeah, my name is Ghanem and I'm 29 years old. I'm engineer by profession, but definitely have passion for healthy eating and raising awareness to live a more sustainable, a better eco-friendly lifestyle. That passion have started way back in 2013 when I used to live in the US. I was watching one day a show called Good Morning America, and they were talking a little bit about how food can change the way you look, food can change the way you feel. And at that moment, for me, it didn't mean anything. They were trying to promote a book called The Beauty Detox, which is by an author called Kimberly Snyder. And at that point, I remember going to Barnes and Noble, picking up that book and trying to see if there's anything that I can understand and learn from that book. I remember picking that book, and the first thing that book said is to go vegan. And I was like, what do you mean go vegan? Like, I eat meat, I eat chicken, I eat fish, I eat all the animals on that I can have. And as part of my Qatari culture, it was really difficult for me to grasp the idea of going vegan. I remember putting the book back on the shelf, going with my life. During those 2 weeks after seeing that book, I kept being bombarded by these advertisements on the streets, on TV. Every time I open the TV, there's somebody talking about veganism. Sometimes I walk on the streets of New York and there's this big billboard talking about almond milk. And I think at that point, I realized there's something in that book that I need to go back and get it. Something is telling me, a message is being sent by somebody, of course, telling me I need to go and read it. So I went back to Barnes and Noble, bought the book, went back home. I used to live with my friend, started reading the book very loudly. He was sitting there in the living room. And every time I said something from that book, we started laughing because everything in that book was saying to stop eating dairy, to stop consuming dairy, to stop eating cheese. And I was like, at that moment, in denial. I don't know why I continued reading it. I felt there's something in me was saying, continue read it, but just don't apply it. And I remember, with everything, with every new information that we get, we always go through phases. I think the first phase is denial. The second phase is accepting, and then the third phase is practicing, and then the fourth is embracing. And I think I went through that pretty much. And I believe that the first thing I did is I said, you know what, let me give it a try. I'm not going vegan, but let me give it a try. Let me try it on my body. And I started doing green smoothies and switching the chicken in my Caesar salad to just having like maybe extra avocados and then suddenly I start feeling better. And I was like, oh my God, why is that happening? How I'm just like changing my diet and suddenly my body feels better. My mind feels clearer. And from that point, I started adding more vegetables into my diet and started adding more real, natural, organic food into my diet. At that moment, I didn't want to go vegan. My intention wasn't to go vegan. My intention was just to feel better. Suddenly, 6 months later, I came back to Doha. I graduated from the US. I came back. I settled in Doha. And I remember waking up on Sports Day that year. So the National Sports Day of Qatar. And I remember saying to myself, oh, it seems like I'm vegan now because I didn't have chicken or fish or meat or dairy for 3 months. And I'm like, I wasn't never meant to be vegan. And I remember on that day, I made a kind of like an agreement with myself. I went on my Instagram. I posted a challenge. I said, I'm going to challenge myself to go vegan for 1 year. And I said that on my Instagram, and the post is still there 7 years ago or 8 years ago. And it says that I am going to go vegan for 1 year. And if it didn't work, I'm going to go back to eating the way I eat. And there is no hard feelings. There's no pressure. I went vegan. And I think that, and I never went back. And I think this is kind of like maybe where my journey have started and how I kind of become, let's say, passionate about eating plant-based. So going from that, I remember when I became vegan, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of concerns. So many people were coming to me. It's like, how could you let go of your tradition, your culture, your religion? They're bringing everything into the conversation. And I felt at that point, oh my God, I don't know the answer to these things. I felt so overwhelmed. I loved the feeling that I was in, but I was confused in my brain. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing to me, to myself, to my health, to my family, to everybody, because it was a big deal for them. Apparently, my diet was a big deal for my family. I don't know why. Looking back now, I feel like shouldn't happen. Everybody should choose their diet, but people were just so concerned about what I was eating. So I started educating myself. I started reading a lot of books. I started traveling, and I think this was the breakthrough. I started traveling to almost like in 2014, 15, and 16. I went to almost 33 countries around the world. And those countries, I started visiting cultures and people who live on this lifestyle, started researching, trying to find vegans and plant-based people and people who embrace this kind of lifestyle, started visiting restaurants, talking to people and telling them, why would you go vegan? Why is it important for you to ditch meat and the dairy industry? And I remember going to India or going to Morocco or Jordan or even China. I found this old guy in China, like he was 88 years old, running his own restaurant, a vegan restaurant. And I sat there and I spoke to him. I remember I was like, why did you go vegan? And people were telling me their answers. And to be very honest, everybody had a different point and everybody had a different reason of why they went vegan. But most people went vegan because they felt better. It just feels better to eat less meat, less chicken, less dairy. And I was like, wow, there's all these answers in their cultures. Some people have related to their religion. Some people related that to their habits and their grandparents and how they, their food. And I also stayed in Cambodia for a while. And in Cambodia, what I found out is that the poor people were eating the fruits and the vegetables, and the rich people were eating the meats. But then when I went to the poor people and I said to them, why you guys want to eat the meat? They said, because fruits and vegetables are the poor people food. And that's why we want to eat the meat. So I was like, wait a second, but in Qatar, eating fruits and vegetables for the rich people, because whoever can afford organic food is only rich here. And that's pretty much the assumption that people think, I guess, when going vegan, is that vegan food is only for rich people. Vegan food is only for certain kind of people with a certain income. So yeah, going to these travel, coming back and forth from Doha to these countries, I always came back and I felt so responsible. I felt I have something to say to my country. I felt like, oh my God, I have all this knowledge that I've learned, all these information that I have, and I wanted to share that with the people of Qatar. I didn't want to do it in that beginning because I faced a lot of rejection from people. People didn't want to hear my information. People didn't want to understand where I'm coming from. They didn't care. They felt this is kind of something that is a westernized kind of, I would say, idea and ideology, and they didn't want to entertain it. But I remember when I started sharing it on my social media, I found a lot of people were interested in just me experiencing veganism. And then I started, going to schools, and I started being asked to do lectures. And I had the food festival in Doha, giving me the platform to go and visit 20 schools every year to educate them about eating more vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. People are getting a little bit excited now about eating more fruits and vegetables. And I started getting recognized on what I'm doing to my own diet, not even doing anything yet. I didn't open a business yet. I didn't do anything. People were just recognizing my efforts in educating the people. And I was like, wow, there's so much more needed in our community when it comes to health and wellness. And when I felt responsible, I was like, oh my God, how can I teach all these people? People were coming to me saying, Ghanem, I want to go vegan. I don't know how. Ghanem, I want to try going vegan. I don't know how. Ghanem, I want to try the food because maybe I will like it. And maybe then I will decide to go vegan. And people couldn't understand. Every time I spoke about veganism, they were like, okay, so let me try it. And I couldn't invite all these people to my house and say, yalla, let's make this huge dinner and try to convince you to go vegan. And I was like, how can I inspire them on a bigger level? And that's where Evergreen came in 2016, where I decided to create a space where I wanted to inspire people, not just to eat vegan, but to live a sustainable lifestyle by making sure that that space is made from sustainable materials, by that making sure that space is resembling the word sustainability when it comes to everything that's being used, to everything being produced in that place. And in my opinion, Evergreen was meant to be a small cafe to be opened and to cater to a certain group of people. And what was shocking, to be honest, is that we opened on the 1st of September, 2016, 5 o'clock to be exact. At 4:55, I was sitting there with my team, and there was no, at that time, there was no, I would say, hype when it comes to, let's say, restaurants and coffee shops. And we were pretty much maybe one of the first Qatari restaurants ever opened. Like before the blockade, restaurants weren't a thing for Qataris to open. It wasn't like a thing like now, let's say. And I remember sitting there and I was talking to my team, and I said to them, you know what? I don't know if people will show up. I don't know if people will come through those doors. What I know is that we did our best to create the best food in town when it comes to the ingredients, when it comes to the quality, when it comes to the offerings. I only know one vegan, and it was me. And I was like, okay, I'm the vegan. I'm going to be your first customer, but I don't know any other people. And to be honest, when we open at 5 o'clock, and this it's documented and people have it's out there and people can actually go and see that we've had a full house in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes for a vegan cafe that sells healthy food, that's pretty much vegetables. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, we're in the Middle East. We're in Qatar, in a city where they love meat and fish and chicken. And there are people that are not vegan. People are not vegan, and they just showed up. And it was full. It was packed. It was disaster for the restaurant. We couldn't serve all these people. We were not ready to serve those people. We had complaints. We had a lady shouting there saying my food was delayed for 2 hours. It was horrible when it comes to restaurant experience, but it was shocking when it comes to the people that came to that day. And I remember for the next 2 months, we couldn't open only for 4 hours daily. We opened from 5 till 10 o'clock daily, 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. because we couldn't handle opening more than that. It was impossible. So I guess that at that time, I remember my dad came into the opening, and my dad didn't, and my family weren't really supported before that. Actually, my family didn't know that I'm opening the restaurant. They only knew about it a week before I opened. And the reason I didn't tell my family is that I didn't want any influence when it comes to my decisions. I didn't want anybody to change the way I think about what is right, what's not right. People were telling me, you're crazy opening a vegan concept in Qatar. I mean, there's no market. I didn't do a market study. I didn't do a survey. I didn't ask people, would you like a vegan food? Because I know if I asked people, they were like, oh, I don't want vegan food. So I didn't wait for that. I didn't wait for an answer from people. And I guess my dad, when he came in, the look of it on his face, he was like, he looked at me and he said, Ghanem, now I understand why you're pursuing this. Because he saw all these people and he said like, oh my God, look at this community. Look at these happy people eating fruits and vegetables. Like, who knew? And he's like, and at that point, I think it started becoming, I got confident in what I'm doing. I became so aware of the impact that food can have on people, community, bringing people together on sustainability and lifestyle. And from that, I started opening up other businesses And not opening up businesses because I wanted to make money, because believe me, if I want to make money in Doha, I shouldn't be opening vegan concept or not sustainable concept or eco-friendly concept. And yeah, and even though it have to be a profitable business for it to continue, it wasn't the intention. I started having opportunities, but then also I started becoming more aware of my own lifestyle. So then I started thinking, wow, I'm thinking about everything that I put on my body. What about things I put on my skin? What about things that I put on my body? On the outside of my body? And that's where Botany came in. Botany is the first vegan skincare line in Qatar that I've started by myself back in 2016, and now it's being sold in more than 8 hotels in Doha. And it's we have 2 flagship store, one at the Gate Mall, which is a full spa that we just opened 3 months ago. Which is going to get closed tomorrow because of the lockdown news that we just got. And then I've opened a flagship store also in the Pearl. And then after Botany, the blockade came in. And when the blockade came in, 5 days after that, I had a very great opportunity comes to me, where I had issues with sourcing my own packaging for my restaurants, for my packaging, for my skincare. And that's where Papercut came in. And I was like, oh my God, no one is going to do it. I need to do it because I need eco-friendly packaging. I need to create that ecosystem for my own company, because I can't sell you a product telling you that this is going to save the environment and I put it in plastic. I can't give you a product that says it's healthy for you and I put it in plastic. It just didn't make sense. So I had to create something by myself. And that's where Papercut, it's a factory that started at 150 square meter and in the industrial area. A workshop that we used to do everything manually with hand, that today we are at 3,000 square meter where everything is automated, and we are serving 300 restaurants in Qatar with every eco-friendly packaging. And that's only started 5 days after the blockade. So it was literally an opportunity that came in to me. And all of these things are opportunities. And then literally after that, we launched Green and Go, because we had the rail system coming to us and saying, we want healthy food in our metro stations. And we were like, you know what, let's create you a new concept that fits the metro. And we created Green and Go, where we wanted something that's more affordable than Evergreen. So the price range is a little bit less. We wanted something that's package eco-friendly, that's on the go, doesn't make you wait for your food, cheap, easy, simple, delicious. And now Green and Go is in 4 branches, one in the ECC station, 1 is opening up soon at the Qatar National Library station, and 3 at Workington, which are in Al Fardan Center, Al Ghasar Tower, and Al Fardan Lusail. And they are very small pop-up, very small operational cost, but they're so effective because you just come get your food and leave. You have 1 person working there. So it's a perfect business model, to be honest. And then after that, I launched my investment company called Inbat Holdings, because I wanted something that can run all these businesses. It was overwhelming to have all these businesses running at the same time. And I started launching different concepts. And my latest concept, which were all launched during the pandemic of last year and got delayed, of course. But one of the most proudest moments is launching Milk at the Gate Mall, which is a vegan ice cream chocolate shop, which is the first vegan ice cream and chocolate shop in Qatar and in the region, to be honest. We've launched literally on the 7th of April, 1 year ago today. Today is the anniversary, actually, of that. And I'm very proud because we've opened when nothing was getting opened. We've opened when everything was shutting down. We were, and to be honest, it sounds crazy for a vegan concept to open in a crisis. But I mean, talk about determination and commitment. Well, we have it. And don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, all of these things are very hard. And I have a team behind me. I have 150 people behind me working day and night. And we are constantly stressed and there's so much going on. But at the end of the day, of course, I have to also count the blessings that we have and all the great things that are coming to our plates. After that, 6 months after that, I opened the Botany Lab, which is a spa at the Gate Mall, which offers people non-invasive treatments for their face. So we are kind of creating an alternative for people who loves to do Botox and fillers and all of these surgeries, but doing it with a natural source. So we're doing all of these amazing massages for the face, all manually done. That gives you the same effect of Botox. So it's actually a revolution, to be honest, for all these girls and people and guys, of course, that are out there that are looking to take care of their skin, which we're doing amazing, to be honest. And 2 weeks ago, I've launched my last concept called Talatin, which is at the National Museum of Qatar. It was a request by Her Excellency Sheikh Mayasa to bring healthy vegan food to the National Museum of Qatar. And when people like Al Mayasa come to you and send, like, reach out and say, I want you to open something, even though you have so much on your plate, you can't say no, and you can't say I can't do it. And even though you can't handle it, but you know what? We have to do it because I felt like more connected. I felt this is the National Museum. This means something to Qatar. This is going to show that Qatar is focusing on health and wellness, and it's going to put a strong message out there that veganism is not just a trend. It's actually a movement, and it's something that, and we've launched after 1.5 years of being delayed, of course, because of COVID. We've launched 2 weeks ago, and it's doing fantastic. It's a cultural shop where we do all kind of food from all part of the world, but it's veganized. So we have dals, and we have pastas, and we have burgers, and we have Qatari eggs and tomatoes. So you name it, everything from all over the world to bring it in the National Museum. So to summarize everything that I just said, I mean, this is just my journey and where I am today, and opportunities are keep on coming, and there's a lot to do, and there's a lot to give back. And I'm very grateful and very happy to be part of such a beautiful community in Qatar, to be able to not just inspire people to be healthy, but I think a lot of people are more conscious nowadays because of our work, our commitment to health and wellness. We kept visiting schools, we kept doing lectures, and education was our core in every business. Every business that we have is about education. If education doesn't exist, you will not get what we are selling. You will not appreciate it. You will not value it. You will not see the potential and the value of it. And I'm very proud today that we were the starter of pushing all these supermarkets to do vegan. I mean, come on, guys. I'm sure you went to Lulu and Megamart. Those vegan aisles didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. It didn't exist. It exists today. And I'm sure there's people buying it because Lulu would not make a huge aisle of only vegan product. It would just not happen. And I believe that that's because there's awareness out there. There's people are buying these products and actually finally thinking of, and all these documentaries that I keep popping in on Netflix, like Seaspiracy just a few days ago about the fish industry, and then there's Cowspiracy about the meat industry. There's a lot of amazing educational documentaries that are allowing us nowadays to make wiser decisions. I don't think veganism is for everyone. I don't think it's the solution, but I do believe that it is the best diet that people can do these days. I think it's the most healthiest diet today. And I believe that when it comes to the environment, it can make a huge impact because the amount of carbon dioxide that's being, and the emissions that are coming out of our diet is very, very hurtful. So to summarize this, I am very, as I said, honored to be among all amazing entrepreneurs. And I'm still young. I'm 29 years old. I know I have a lot on my shoulders. I still feel like there's more to give, and I still feel there's so much more to learn. I'm still learning. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm not perfect. My business is not perfect, but I think I'm definitely trying to create a little bit of a different narrative, and that narrative is not yet, let's say, appreciated in this region. But I'm 100% sure that this is the future, and that's the way we're going to. And I feel like that's where Qatar needs to go to. Thank you so much.
Wow, Ghanem, that was really an inspiring, insightful, and motivating session. Can we have a big round of applause for Ghanem? Guy, I think Ghanem, I think now a lot of audience will be moving towards after listening to you towards veganism. Of course, the vegan is the future, and it's really for the sustainable development. And for kind information, I am also a regular customer of the Evergreen Organics. I really like that concept of yours. I'm visiting there. So guys, now thank you so much, Ghanem, once again for your session. Now moving forward, I would like to now hand over the session to CA Rakesh Baheti to take up the virtual summit forward. Over to you, CA Rakesh.
Thank you, CA Ankit. Good evening, members. We are really thankful to Mr. Anirudh Damani for accepting our invite at a very short notice. It is my pleasure to introduce him. who is Mr. Anirudh Damani, who is a managing partner and founder in many of the Artha company and has a double major in business administration and economics from Austin College. He is a fourth generation entrepreneur in his family with a portfolio of 85 plus startups across the globe. Almost every startup company look up to him as a mentor, and Mr. Anirudh worked closely with the founder for a rapid scaling up. And he firmly believes that investing in a startup at an early stage creates the maximum impact in their life cycle. His unique investment style has generated more than 50% IRR between 2012 to 2020 and excel in when to invest and to exit. As a result, he already got returned 1.5x in cash from 16 of his exits. Every success comes with an essence of flavor. We called it experience to fall and rise. And so the journey of Mr. Anirudh Damani was. He started his journey as a salesperson, become entrepreneur of a debt-ridden company and turned it into profit. Although not all of his investment have been a success, but what brings success on his table is the attitude of I do not shy away from failures. So with great pleasure, we invite Mr. Anirudh Damani to address our member on wealth creation by investing in startup. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rakesh. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I must, before I even begin, really commend the last speaker, Mr. Ghanem. That was a truly inspiring speech, and lots to think about to open something so challenging in the region. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, to the Doha chapter of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, because I know it was short notice, but I finally get a chance to talk about the India story and what's really happening in India. I've prepared a very short presentation, and hopefully towards the end, I can get a little bit more deeper into how wealth is getting created and why there is so much interest in the Indian startup ecosystem. So if I have everyone, can I go ahead and share my screen for a brief few moments?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So I think the most important thing to understand is that that India has, with COVID, had this alt control delete moment in its history, right? And whatever you've thought about India prior to 2020 and to what is happening now, there is a complete paradigm shift in the way things are operating in India today. And hopefully through this presentation, I'll be able to take you through some of the changes that are taking place. So the three things that are going on, there is a reset effect, as we call it in COVID. There's a change impact and a future outlook that I'll take you through. The biggest beneficiary that of the COVID impact in India has been the massive spurt in internet population. Now, I'll just put this in perspective. China has always been far ahead of India when it comes to internet penetration. So at the start of 2020, India was at about a 41% penetration, which means 41% of India's population had access to the internet. And China at that time was 57%, right? In a single year, by the end of 2020, which is start of 2021, India had already caught up with China and was at 57% internet penetration by the end of the year. Now, it may seem like like 16 percentage points, but if you look at the massive size of India, you're talking about India adding the entire US population onto the internet in a single year. And let's not forget, India continues to dominate when it comes to the consumption of mobile or consumption of internet on mobile. India consumes somewhere around 12 gigabytes of data per month per mobile device at a base of 760 million internet subscribers that are connected to the internet via mobile. Now, these numbers are extremely important because every single mobile in India today can be considered to be a mini mall in a person's hand, and that is leading to a massive change in consumer psychology in the way things are getting consumed across the length and breadth of India. And by the end of 2022, which is end of next year, they're expecting India to have 859 million smartphone users. So that would put India and China right next to each other, but India would be probably bigger than the next 4 or 5 ranked countries combined at that point. And so what is that? What is that leading to, right? Because the penetration for the first time in India's history, the number of internet subscribers in India was higher in rural India than it was in urban India. And that's why you're seeing a lot of Indian startups now finding their ground or finding their customers outside the traditional major cities. So I'm just putting together the 2-3 companies which I know very well. Purple is a company that I invested in as a seed investor. Today, Purple is getting 80% of its revenues from the tier 2 and tier 3 markets in India. These are places where traditional retail has not even penetrated, and this is India's leapfrog moment again in retail, where things are reaching direct to consumer products are reaching to consumers before traditional retail can actually get there. If you look at Licious, which is another company that is doing extremely well, they've seen a 300% rise in revenue during COVID, and what are they providing? They're providing fresh meat to people, to the Indian consumer, and they're doing those sales online. And one of the most favorite games last year in India has been Ludo. I think most of the people on this call would have at least heard of, if not seen, people get completely addicted to playing Ludo. I think I have lots of friends that even today, that up till 1 a.m. every single day playing this very age-old Indian game. But it's got people enamored. But people may not realize Ludo King generated 150 crores in revenue last year, and it is not a funded company. So this entire movement is not about funding; it is about finally satiating the need of Indian consumers, and they are coming out in droves. They're coming out from every nook, cranny, and corner, and looking for new products, for new services. They're looking for something better, and they're willing to consume that online. In fact, just I think day before yesterday, I was reading an article that India, with its massive length and breadth, has an Amazon Prime user in 98.3% of Indian pin codes. So just think about the size of India, and would you have ever thought that Amazon Prime, that charges 1,000 rupees a year for membership, they have at least one member in 98.3% of Indian zip codes. And in the last 12 months, 99% of Indian pin codes received at least one online delivery. Now, this entire ecosystem that is taking off, and it has actually accelerated because of COVID, is the reason why the entire global economy is looking at India, and that has led obviously to a surge in the number of entrepreneurs, right? The number of companies that are getting formed in India, the number of companies that and again, in recessionary environments, it's a known thing that most of your large and well-funded or well-known companies were actually formed during a recession. Everything from an Apple down to a Flipkart, right? So what does that mean? What's the impact, right? What are the opportunities that this has unlocked? So first thing to understand is that the cost of doing business in India has reduced significantly. I came back to India from the US in 2012, and the cost to start a business, both in terms of time, effort, and money, has probably come down by a factor of 95%. Because when I started off in India, you had to you had to pay 6 months of a rental deposit. You had to build an office. You had to buy desks, chairs. You needed servers. You needed full-time workers. You need to have enough money to pay those guys for the next 12 to 18 months. You needed to buy laptops, and all this would cost a lot of hard money. Today, in today's world, if you look at how work from home or co-working has completely changed the paradigm in India. You don't even require servers. In most cases, you'll have an AWS, an Azure, a Google, or an IBM giving you $100,000 worth of free credit just to get started, right? And this was not available 10 years ago. So today, when we're investing in companies, we're no longer investing in companies to build infrastructure to get started. We are investing in companies that have already started generating revenues while they are bootstrapping. In fact, we tell companies that if you are not able to generate revenues in today's India, and you're coming to us to get started, you need money to get started, you're living in a different world altogether. And that has, again, it has completely changed the way investors are looking at India and how founders are thinking about their startups as they get going. And I think this is a movement that is going to continue down the road where you're going to see lesser and lesser number of companies getting funded that have not already started generating revenues. So those pre-revenue startups that we probably funded 10 years ago are now revenue generating startups that are funding today. So, and that obviously on the back of all of this has led to an increase in foreign investments, right? Just 2020, despite the 3 or 4 months of wipeout because of COVID, we were able to achieve or even beat the numbers that we had the previous year, and US being one of the largest contributors to the Indian investment ecosystem, right? In fact, the loss that we had from China because of the Chinese investments not coming to India were more than made up by investments coming in from Japan, by investments coming in from the Middle East, from investments coming in even from the Far East, right? And this again is a trend that will make up for the Chinese investment that is now missing in India, with other ecosystems coming in and pouring money into the Indian ecosystem. As an overall whole, the VC investments increased in India. They've recovered extremely well. In fact, India is now generating one unicorn roughly every 3.5 weeks. So yesterday we announced, I think, Kunal Shah's Cred became a unicorn. So, since Q3 of last year, you've had one unicorn every 3 weeks, and that's a pace that is going to continue ahead as we go. So, even India has become an ecosystem where founders are now coming back and starting new companies, right? Obviously, Kunal Shah that I talked about, Ramakant Sharma, who was the CTO for Myntra. You look at Sachin Bansal, who started Navi. This is again an ecosystem that is maturing. It's letting you know that there is space, and the people that have created successful companies are able to exit those companies and come back and start new companies. This is an ecosystem that has matured very, very quickly. We're having our leapfrog moments in India, and that's why you're seeing so many exits are also taking place, because founders are not looking on to holding on to their companies forever. They're more than happy to take an exit, invest in other companies, nurture other founders, and build solid portfolios as they grow bigger. And participation from Indian corporates and family offices. I think this has been by far the biggest reason why 90% of all India's PVC exits have happened in the last 3 years. You're seeing every single major corporate, I would say the top 100 most valuable companies in India have started investing in startups, or have started acquiring startups, or are taking meaningful positions inside startups. Obviously, we've heard about Reliance now backing the Kalari fund, but you're also finding that the Mariwalas, or whether it is Azim Premji or the Ratan Tata, all of these guys are looking at either directly investing through their through their companies itself, or also investing through their family offices, and they're willing to acquire startups. This was not available. This was not even a strategy 10 years ago. The Indian M&A market has been skyrocketing for the last 3 to 4 years, and again, this means the money that is going out is churning and coming back in, and is giving exits to investors who are then investing back into the ecosystem once again. And last but not the least, what's the future outlook, right? I think 2021 will be an all-time high year for India, right? Just looking at the kind of volume that is coming out, the kind of actual business that is taking place on the ground, and the fact that the M&A market continues to be extremely vibrant. Akash just got acquired by Byju's a couple of days ago. That was $1 billion exit. Now, all the investors on that cap table that made money from that exit are going to come back and put that money back into the ecosystem. There'll be $1 billion worth of liquidity available to go back into the Indian startup ecosystem once again. And this is going to produce the next generation of unicorns in India. And this is going to be a continuing theme as India charts its path in the startup ecosystem. In the current pipeline of unicorns, and unfortunately I was a couple of days late in updating this, but Cred is already a unicorn, right? And in this chart, you're going to see the next few unicorns coming out of India. And the average time taken to become a unicorn in India has gone from 7 years to somewhere close to 3 years, which is again quite impressive for an ecosystem that is as young as the one we have in India. And the government is obviously providing its every push available. There are startup seed funds. The Prime Minister has has announced a 10,000 crore venture fund. Our fund has also received some money from that venture fund of fund that was announced, and the government keeps on trying to make it easier and easier to clear the decks for more and more startups to participate in the Indian economy. So when it comes to investing, the four things that I look at when I'm investing is that it's a very big market in India now to be investing into, but looking at an overall whole, a startup must solve a real human problem. It's very easy to invest in things that look good, that sound good, that maybe nice to have, but the startups that really make the most money for you are solving a real human problem because they're a need to have problem. If you're solving something that is a consumer need, there will always be a market, there will always be a consumer that is willing to pay you a price at which you can make a profit, which goes into point two, is that you need to invest in companies that have positive unit economics and they can sustainably grow without requiring too much effort and too much discounting from, that is on the back of VC money. Third, you build a business model which has an edge over its competition. Is always important in India, especially in the Indian context, that your startup must be in the top two of its category. India is a market where after the top two, we don't remember 3, 4, and 5. If you ask anybody in India, what are the top two taxi providers in India? It's Ola and Uber. Who's number 3? We don't know. If somebody asks you, how do you buy things online? It's Flipkart or Amazon. Who's number 3? We don't know. And that is why because 80 to 90% of the recall, of the funding, of the sales that in a particular category go to the top 2 players in India. So you have to make sure that you are having at least a 6 to 9 month lead over your competition and you continue to maintain that lead. India is not a place where a 3, 4, 5, 6 player can survive and provide you excellent wealth creation options. And lastly, businesses have to be tech enabled, but you cannot have great technology looking for a business. It has to be a business that is getting catalyzed by building technology. And therefore, India is not again, I believe this is true for anywhere in the world, but you don't invest just because somebody it builds great technology. Because technology itself cannot generate profits. A business model will generate profits. So invest in business models that are getting accelerated using technology. And that is, again, a very important, these are the 4 common things that we look at when we're investing into a business. And therefore, a lot of my portfolio, you see, has, usually very little burn rates and a much higher revenue rate as a whole. Sectors to look out for, I think B2B SaaS in India is doing very well. The D2C ecosystem is supposed to become $100 billion economy in the next 3 to 4 years. And that, again, is exploding in India. Fintech, despite the size of India and everything we've done over the last 25 years, India only is home to only about 50 million credit card users. 50 million credit card users in a country of 1.5 billion. If you look at US, a country of 300 million, they have 1.8 billion credit card users. So you can understand how little penetration in India we have towards credit. And that is itself going to become a huge opportunity. And I've already explained that online gaming and esports is, again, a growing category. Just look at the success of Ludo King. So the ingredients that India has to become the unicorn factory of the world: lowest internet rates in the world, 56% internet penetration, it's the largest middle class in the world, single market, stable government, and we have a vibrant and a stable digital payments economy that is doing extremely well, and it has actually connected the entire country, especially in these COVID times when the lockdowns are going on. So what's the count? I think when I started making this presentation about 3 months ago, we were at 35, we're at 39. Hopefully next year, when I have to do this presentation again, we'll probably be at least 55, on the way to 150. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anirudh, for such an insightful information. What we have learned today is that COVID, though, has adverse side, but also creating an opportunity. How the big corporates are taking interest in acquiring the startup, and India is going to be the biggest hub for the unicorn in coming years. What are the important factors we learned from our today's session is that to solve a real human problem is one of the criteria for investing in any startup, making money for you. business model, and which is driven by the technology. So coming to the questions. What are the platforms where retail investors can participate in investing in a startup, and what are the minimum ticket size?
So, great question, Ankur. I think the way to look at it is since these are highly specialized investments, usually you want to either enter the investment through somebody that has been in the ecosystem. So there are a couple of ways to do that. Now, for the first way, obviously, is you could join an angel network and look at deals on a deal by deal basis, but that could take a bit of time as you build a portfolio. One of the easiest ways, and many people in the people living outside of India have been utilizing is utilizing venture capital funds. Right, India is now home to about 88 micro VC funds, and it's also home to many large VC funds as well. So there's a much better chance of having somebody who's been in the ecosystem, has made investments, and you can participate through their venture capital fund. And many of these funds offer co-investment rights. So when they're writing in checks, they can also take additional checks written by you directly. So it sort of makes it easier for you to enter the ecosystem and also start building a portfolio. Just remember that this is a portfolio style investing. It is not about just picking one or two companies and hoping that they're going to do well. You need to make a portfolio of at least 50 to 60 companies over a 5 to 6 year period to be able to generate the kind of alpha that this ecosystem can provide.
Though we have a couple of questions, I will take one more question, which is from Jacob. From which sources can we receive information about Indian startup? Any website or magazines?
A couple of them that are doing very well. I think Your Story is one, and the other one is Inc42. There is a few more like the Ken and things like that. But yeah, I think the top two would be Inc42 and Your Story.
Thank you, Mr. Anirudh, for your time. I would like to hand over the session now to CA Devki. CA Devki, over to you. CA Devki.
Yeah. Thank you, Rakesh. Dear members, we have now entered on the last segment of our two-day Startup Summit panel discussion. Panel discussions are the hallmark of modern conferences and events, even virtual ones. We need a moderator who sets the tone, the pace, and control of the content, staying ever vigilant in keeping it relevant for the audience. To take this panel discussion forward and make it more interesting, we have a moderator with us, a known personality amongst our CA fraternity. I would like to introduce him with his favorite quote. Leaders don't do different things, but do things differently. He is a chartered accountant and certified management accountant. He has worked in India and the Middle East with prestigious organizations including RasGas Company Limited and McDermott International. He works as the finance director of Qatar Rail, one of the most prestigious and largest infrastructure projects undertaken by Qatar. He was past chairman of Doha chapter of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He was awarded the prestigious CA Professional Achiever Award for the year 2019 by the Doha chapter of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He was nominated by the Indian Ambassador to Qatar as the head of finance and secretary golf of the Indian Sports Center, which is an apex body functioning under the Indian Embassy, Qatar. He was honorary past auditor of the Indian Community Benevolent Fund and Indian Cultural Center. Both organizations works under the aegis of Indian Embassy, Qatar. Dear members, please help me welcome with big round of virtual applause CA Ravi Sankar. The virtual floor is all yours, sir. Over to CA Ravi. Thank you.
Thank you, Devki. Thank you. Nirlat, can we have the confirmation that all our panelists are available or on online, please? Can you tell me that? I can see Anirudh. I can see Mr. Inamdar.
Yeah,
I can
sir.
see Mr. Inamdar. Obviously, Anurag, I can see. Is Mr. Siddharth also there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you. Thanks a lot for that. Good evening and a warm welcome to everyone to this session, this last session of the Startup Summit. I'm sure we have tried to reserve the best for the last. Let's hope so. We head into an interesting panel discussion. It's all about startup success. And for the past more than a decade, growth rates have always defined success for most technology companies. And that has become the mantra of the 21st century, resulting in creating new tech giants, brand new industries, and an era in which online content, community, and commerce have redefined how we live, learn, and work. In a marathon, pacing and perseverance are paramount. Longevity in business creation is taken for granted. Nobody sets out a company or starts a company with an expiration date. But however, having said that, very few startups would think critically enough about the cornerstones that are essential to endure. When we take a look at long-standing companies across various industries, we definitely see several foundational elements that have contributed to these companies' tenures. By adopting such standards, startups can increase their odds of long-term sustainability without negatively impacting short-term growth or society at large. That is the crux of our panel discussion today. We will focus on the trilogy of startup success, finance, governance, and leadership. Please allow me to introduce our elite quartet of panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Samir Inamdar, an investor, a strategist, a mentor, speaker, co-founder, managing director, and CEO, Forum Synergies India, PE Fund Managers. He has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Mumbai University and a postgraduate diploma and master's from the IIM Kolkata. He has an extensive general management experience of over 40 years, has driven business strategy and transformation, explosive growth through organic as well as M&A initiatives, build world-class teams, brands, and distribution channels. Please join me in virtually welcoming Mr. Samir Inamdar. Our second panelist is CA Anurag Mittal, who is the Deputy CFO of Snapdeal. He has close to 17 years of post-qualification experience working with Paytm, Nokia, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. He has a strong exposure in fundraising, business and strategic finance, and business acquisitions. He has excellent experience in designing and developing e-commerce operating models, including wallets and payment gateways. He has been recognized by the CFO Next 100 for the year 2017 by the CFO Institute and Distinction in Finance Award for the year 2018. Please join me in welcoming CA Anurag Mittal. Our third panelist he has moved seamlessly as a panelist from a keynote speaker in our previous session. You just heard him, and he was absolutely wonderful in the previous session. And we have the opportunity to hear him again. He is Mr. Anirudh Damani, founder and managing director, managing partner at Arth Venture Fund. He has a double major in business administration and economics from Austin College, Texas. Impressive portfolio of 85 startups across the US, India, Israel, and Southeast Asia, with companies like Tala, Oyo, Purple, Baby Chakra, etc. He is a sought-out investor today in his early picks. He firmly believes that investing in startups at an early stage creates the maximum impact in the life cycle. Did we know that he is also a certified scuba diver? That's wonderful. He also writes blogs on www.showmedamani.com, where he shares his ideas, thoughts, and experiences. A warm welcome to Mr. Aniruddha. Our fourth and final panelist is CA Siddharth Pai, founding partner and CFO, 314 Capital, and is an early stage venture capital fund house based in Bangalore with cumulative assets under management of over $200 million. He also works extensively on policy for startups and investors. He's an expert policy member of Spirit, the Indian Software Product Industry Roundtable, a Bangalore-based think tank. Please join me in welcoming Mr. C.A. Siddharth Pai. Now that we have set the stage, without much ado, let us dive straight into the discussion. The format that we will follow would be to request each panelist to share his perspective on a question that we'll give him, and then he can respond in about 8 to 10 minutes. I think 8 minutes, given that we are already at 8 o'clock probably. Once we complete this first round of questions, if we have availability of time, we'll delve deeper on some of the points touched by the panelists. We plan to close off with a brief Q&A session. We'll take it as it comes based on the time availability. Let's set the ball rolling. I believe Mr. Samir Inamdar is a cricket enthusiast. So we have picked him as our opening batsman. He's at the crease, he's marked his guard, and he's ready to face the first delivery. Coming up right arm over the wicket, here is the first ball or question. It's for you, sir, Mr. Inamdar. What would be the appropriate governance structure for a startup, which will demonstrate both the awareness and commitment of the founders and also meet the standards and expectation of the investors? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ravi Shankar. Thank you, the Doha chapter of Indian Chartered Accountants Institute. It's a real pleasure to be here on this seminar, on this panel. Just to let you know, apart from being a cricket enthusiast in my younger days, I also used to be an opening batsman.
Oh, fantastic.
So you know, your bouncers are not going to worry me too much. But I just also want to say, since we are talking about Doha, I had the pleasure of visiting Doha a couple of times. With some lovely museums and some lovely restaurants. We just had a session by Mr. Ghanim about some restaurants. Those are not the kind of restaurants which I visited actually, but it will be a real pleasure to visit that lovely place again. You know, I was asked to talk about governance, and when you look at the amount of money being invested in this, you know, startups, Anirudh in his presentation just talked about a number of around 14 billion, if I'm not wrong, which VCs invest in startups. I think the overall investments is even higher because there are investments from angels and so on. And then, of course, there are investments in growth capital by private equities. Some of them are kind of on the border. So there is a lot of investments which is coming into this private market. SEBI has done a fairly good job in the recent years of ensuring governance in public markets, in listed companies. And that is because, you know, there is public money in that. But then if you look at these markets, there is also public money in these private companies. And therefore, there is definitely a need for governance. The question is, should it be at the same level? Can a startup afford to have the same level, the same you know, the superstructure of governance that SEBI imposes on listed companies? Obviously, the answer should be no, but that also does not mean that we should swing to the other end of the spectrum. I think that a good balance is really what is necessary. So let me first start by saying that a lot of times I find, and since I am in the investing field and I run a private equity fund, a lot of times I find that people do not realize that a fund manager, a GP, actually is managing money of somebody else. So it's not, I mean, yes, there is a little bit of our money, but it's not all our money. And there's a huge amount of money that we manage of somebody else. And that places on us a huge onus of being responsible, fiduciary responsibility for that money. And therefore, even any investor, any VC looks for making sure that, of course, there are business risks and business evaluation, but the basics of governance is not something that, or lack of governance is not something that should hit a investee company that one invests in. Is that's a primary thing.
Do you have a problem here?
Yes, Ravi, I think it's a network issue.
Of course, in startups initially, organizations are pretty thin and flat, but as the business grows, and we just talked, sorry, can you guys hear me? Yeah, we just talked about, Anirudh just talked about several unicorns. So as the business grows, the organization also grows, and the tendency I find of founders is to give a lower priority to governance, and it gets pushed down to a HR guy or somebody like that. I think that's a mistake. Governance is the responsibility to begin with and to end with of the founder. And unless the founder makes it very, very clear through the organization that that's what he is going to expect, it's not going to work. There is always this dichotomy or a dilemma between a performance and governance. So you might have a situation where there's a terrific performer, but he or she tends to cut corners. Or at a company level, you might have a situation where company is performing very well and you want to invest in it, but you know that there are governance problems. And the dilemma is, what do you do at such a situation? And to us, the answer clearly and always is that we ensure that we are only investing when we are comfortable and sure of the governance. So one of the things that we do, in terms of the DD, everybody does legal compliance, legal DD, and financial and tax, and of course also business. But in addition to all this, one of the things that we do is we make sure that we spend a lot of time with the founder or the founders in business situations, but also in informal situations. And to the extent possible, we also visit their homes and meet their families, just to ensure that we check out their value systems, we check out their mindsets, we check out how they think. Because that's, again, very, very important. I think that's, in my opinion, in my investing experience, that has always been a very, very important thing to do. The board, of course, in a startup, the board is not so deep, but the board should always look at two different things. First, there should be a time allocated separately for ensuring governance. And the governance structure can be at 3 or 4 different levels. First is statutory compliance, and that goes without. So we in our reporting structure, there is a special section in a monthly report for all the statutory compliances, and we always put that as a priority. The second is reporting to the investors, and here the paradigm has to be that there has to be full disclosure, there has to be early disclosure, and the bad news always gets the priority. I think that's something that has to be drilled into the mindsets of the founders. The third is the HR structure. And by that, I mean employees, their treatment, their annual appraisal, diversity management, fairness, openness, and so on. And finally, there should be a structure to ensure that all the other interfaces, whether it is internal audit, whether it is suppliers or it is other external stakeholders, like, all the structures of internal audit, the ombudsperson, conflict of interest. But again, like I said before, balance has to be achieved, and this is not something for a startup, but as the startup gets, surely in 3.5 years, like Anirudh said, if the startup is becoming a unicorn, by then they must have these kind of structures set in. So I'll stop here, and I will maybe we can discuss more in the discussion or question answers. But let me hand it back to Mr. Ravi Shankar. Thank you.
Sir, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Mr. Ravi Shankar. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry about that. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Samir Inamdar. This was very, very informative. We will double back and ask you something more or something we'll dwell on later if time allows. Let's just press ahead because we are at 8:15 nearly. And let's start with the second question. And this is for our next panelist, CA Anurag Mittal. This is about talking about finance. What are the issues one may encounter during the fundraising stage? How to mitigate the same if there's any problem? And do you have any tip for a budding startup owner for effectively managing their finance, especially the cash flow, which obviously is the lifeblood of any business? Over to Anurag Mittal.
Thank you very much, Ravi sir, and thank you, Sameer sir, for setting the stage here. And in fact, if we start discussing and thinking about the startups, startup success, startup failures, there are some alarming statistics which come across and which could be concerning for the early stage entrepreneurs, which I'll be going to share it with you. Right? If we'll go and read these statistics over the Google, we'll find that approximately 20% of the startups could not able to survive for a period of 1 year. There are approximately 50% of the startups which could able to survive for a period of 1 year to 5 years. There are approximately 1/3 of the startups which could able to hit the mark of their 10th anniversary only. Now, the big question here is that what is the reason why the startup fails? And one reason, which is an obvious reason, could be the obvious reason that startup fails because the startup or the entrepreneur is not providing the right product, right service, which is the requirement of a customer or the marketplace actually. And the second reason, which has actually come up in the studies, that there is not a well thought financial plans or the models in place since the inception of the startup itself. And that is the reason the role of finance has comes into the play, right? The role of finance here is to actually build the financial mechanism, and it starts from the creation of the right legal structure to the later stage of the startup when the startup plans to go public or so. So here I'll share a few of the aspects which are important for the success of the startup in the entire journey itself. The first and foremost which I want to call out is a right legal structure. Look, there is an importance of a right legal structure from day one itself, because right legal structure helps the startup to actually mitigate the possibility of the potential liabilities. Right legal structure actually help us to design the appropriate tax structures. Right legal structure actually help to attract the potential investors. Right legal structure mitigate the possibility of disputes as and when the startup enters into the subsequent stage of their life cycle. And look, this is the right legal structure which sometimes becomes a resulting and a deciding factor in the later stage of their life cycle when a startup needs to raise the funds. This legal structure itself decides whether we want to raise the fund through a private equity or we need to raise the fund through public. And even if when a company decides to go public, this legal structure will only going to decide that whether you want to go public in a domestic market or is it something like you are targeting the US IPO or the international market, right? And if in case we have the right legal structure on the first day itself, it will be very cost effective, it would be time saving, and it would be easy itself. Second is like financial planning. Financial planning is a great significance in the success and the journey of a startup itself, because financial planning generally gives a clear outline of your goals and it clarifies to the management team that what is the goal post where we have to head in terms of achieving the objectives of the organization. When we do financial planning on the ground, we understand that what all are the key financial drivers of growth, of the success in the life itself. And when we do this financial planning, we understand that what all are the important levers in place through which we can actually move the lever up to reach the growth level or put the lever low to achieve the unit economics in the business side. Look, there are some critical aspects which one has to take care while doing a financial planning. That financial planning should be realistic. And I want to underline itself, because financial planning has to be realistic and honest in itself. 2, that financial planning should not be mathematically driven. It should be logically driven. C, that whosoever do the financial planning, whichever function does the financial planning, should have a clear understanding of a business model. That person should have inside out knowledge of the business model, that what are the products, what are the services the startup and the company offers to the marketplace. And this person should be in a complete sync with the management team in terms of knowing that what all are the strategies we are looking at in a time frame of 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, and so on. And those strategies should reflect in the financial planning itself. It is very important for a person who is doing a financial planning in the startups to understand and know the answers of the questions like that. Who all are the potential customers and where are these potential customers located? Because this is something which is going to create the demand and generate the supply itself. It always becomes important also to understand that how we can reach to our customers. Reach itself means that what is the kind of marketing we are looking at? Is it like offline marketing we are looking at? Is it like online marketing we are looking at? Is it like digital marketing we are looking at? Is it like if we are working in a tier 3 or tier 4 or tier 5 kind of cities? Is it like regional kind of marketing we are looking at? So marketing plays a very important aspect into this. The next important aspect into this is that how we able to deliver the product to our audience and to our customer group, which actually defines the logistics and the supply chain model itself. I'll give you an example here that if we are sitting in a southern region and we are delivering a product into the northeast side, whatever gross margin you are going to earn in that case, look, if you are delivering a product from a south to a northeast, there is no doubt that you will be going to incur a huge value towards your delivery cost. And whatever gross margin you are earning, either you will able to break even your gross margin, or to some extent you will deliver a negative net margin. So understanding the complete flow from a gross margin to your net margin, to your contribution margin, to your EBITDA, to the PAT itself is very important. And once you actually focus on the right aspects of the financial planning, it will help us to weed out all the things at the stage 1 itself. The third point I want to call out is the cash flow management, because there is no doubt that early stage startups actually faces a lot of challenges from the cash flow perspective. If we talk about the normal businesses has these steady cash flows where cash keeps on coming in, cash keeps on going out, cash keeps on going out against the expenses, cash keeps on coming in basis of the value of services. And there itself, what we have to do is to only manage the working capital efficiently and effectively. But in the early stage startups, cash generally goes out initially, cash generally takes time to come in, right? So it becomes very important to prioritize certain things from the cash flow perspective. It is very important for the management team to focus on that. What is the value of cash you have in the bank? You have to be very cognizant of this fact. And what is the value of cash burn you are generating every month is also becomes very important. And you have to understand that what is the multiplier effect here from the cash burn to the value of cash you have. And this multiplier effect should always remain on your fingertips, because this multiplier effect will actually tell you your longevity, that to what extent you can actually play this game in the ecosystem, and what is the value of fuel you have in terms of running your business to become successful that phase. That is the reason cash flow management becomes very, very important. Developing your pitch is the next one, sir. In fact, developing your pitch defines the success of your organization in a big time. In either you say from a perspective of raising the capital, or building the business alliances, or gaining the market share. I have seen various pitches from the early stage startups, and those are beautifully designed in terms of describing their founders team, describing their management teams, describing great about their products, services, technologies, growth plans, and all. But sometimes these pitches misses the financial projections as well as the key financial drivers of your startup. That is very important. And what is important here is to wear the hat of the potential investor. You have to think more from the potential investor's perspective, that if you would be a potential investor, what are certain things you would be looking into that pitch. If you are the potential investor, you will think that what is the ROI you will be going to generate. What is the time frame you look at that you will actually start making money out of it, and you can get an easy exit from that startup. And I think if your pitch will able to define all these things on the face of it itself, it would be easy for a investor also to invest in your business model, and it would be easy for you to raise the capital from the investor also. When we say from the raising of capital perspective, look, there are so many things which involves into raising of capital, starting from discussion with the investors and all. If I'll speak about the term sheet, there are so many things we generally look into the term sheet, but to the early stage startups, I always recommend that you should always look in detail the kind of dilution it is going to happen when a new investors will come in. Also another important clause is the liquidity preference kind of clauses, which should be taken care on the day one itself, because those clauses generally don't impact us in the early stage, but these kind of clauses impact us in the later stage of the startup. So those are very, very important aspects. And look, personally speaking, in fact, raising the capital in the today's scenarios in comparison of raising the capital almost 5 years ago has become very, very difficult. If we have to raise the capital 5 years ago, it was very easy, versus raising capital today is very difficult. Could be one of the reasons that investors also have a lot of options these days, and a lot of energy they spend in terms of understanding the business model before investing into it. But cash itself is a very scarce resource, and the founder of a startup has to understand this particular fact in itself. And if we start keeping a strong control on the cash itself, then it would be very helpful for the startup as well, and it would be very well appreciated by the investor as well. If I'll speak about the next aspect on corporate governance. Look, corporate governance is something which Samir sir has already covered, but I want to cover a very small aspect on the corporate governance that people generally feel so that the early stage startups, the founders of early stage startups doesn't have a focus on the corporate governance. It is true that the early stage founders have the focus on the growth plans. The early stage founders have a focus on their products, services, technologies, building team, and building so many other things. And that is the reason actually they have built the finance function, the CFO function in place. There is no second thought that they don't have the focus on the corporate governance. And I think CFO function has to play a bigger role here in terms of building a strong corporate governance within this from the early stage of the startup itself. I want to share one thing also, that as a best practices, just like the public companies we have, where we have a concept of an audit committees. Audit committees are generally considered as an extension of the board itself. Similarly, if in case we can have the audit committees as a good practices in the private companies or the startups also from the early stage itself, I think, and if these audit committees named as financial advisory groups or named by any other nomenclature, I think that would be very helpful in terms of focusing on the financial aspects of this company, so that we can build that startup from day one to the later stage where startup can think from perspective going public and all. I think if we'll take care of all these aspects from the day one of the startup, it would be very helpful at least to get a success in the life.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anurag. You've covered finance as a success factor fairly well across the entire gamut of stuff. And also you've touched upon the corporate governance piece. Let's just move on to the next question. And that is for Mr. Anirudh Damani. And this is about while taking the investment decision, what are the leadership qualities an investor looks for in a founder or an entrepreneur? Do you feel that leadership quality is one of the critical success factors for startups, especially in such a VUCA world, and why? Over to you, Mr. Anirudh.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ravi Shankar. Yeah, I think the three things that we look for when we're investing in a founder, right, is that that as any leader, that they should work hard, they should study hard, and they should be teachable. Right. So what I mean by working hard is not just about working physically hard. It's not about working 15-hour days, right? And although those are important, it's also working smart, right? And if you're able to do that, if you're able to be highly productive while being smart and working hard, and that creates a huge impact, because that percolates down to the team, right? And that's a strong leadership quality right there. Secondly, when I talk about studying hard, right, it's a lot of the times founders get this tunnel vision, because they're 24/7 just thinking about their own startups. They're not looking at what's happening around in the competition. Many times when we talk to founders, they don't even know who their competition is, and that in today's world, it shows very poorly on the founder, because if you believe you may not have a direct competitor, you definitely have indirect competitors. And if you're unable to identify your own competition, that means you haven't studied your industry well enough. You haven't studied the need of the customer that you are trying to fulfill. because they're currently fulfilling that in some other way, and you just don't know how or who you're replacing for that matter. And third thing, being teachable. Many a time, I think, while it is important for any founder to have resilience, to also be a bit stubborn, but if founders become too stubborn, right, it becomes they don't want to listen to even a reasonable voice. The job of the founder many times is to listen to everyone, but to decide for himself or herself, for that matter. But if they're unwilling to even listen, they're unwilling to even think of playing the devil's advocate or listening to someone's out of the box idea, I think it makes it very difficult for them to grow in the longer term. And that eventually the founder decides the culture of the firm. And if these three things are missing in a founder, then you're going to see that percolate down to the team as well, right? The team is also going to follow what the founder shows. And in today's world, when you're talking about a VUCA world, it is so important to be vigilant, because overnight, if you go back to last year, how many founders on Jan 1st, 2020 thought that within 3 months, whatever business model they were working on was going to come to a grinding halt, right? How many people were ready for that? And if you want listening, if you want connected to your team, if you want hearing what your investors, your advisors, even your senior management team was telling you, many of these companies would get wiped out. I mean, there were some estimates that, almost, I think 2 out of 5 Indian startups did not have enough money to last more than 6 months. When this lockdown started, and 20,000 plus startups went bankrupt last year. These are the kind of numbers that we're talking about. So leadership obviously plays a massive role when it comes, to deciding the course a startup will take. And it cannot be one size fits all. So I'm not going to say that there's one particular kind of leader that every startup requires. Every startup requires its own kind of leadership. Some startups require, some startups require micromanager type of leadership. Some startups require massive teams. So the leader has to actually become a leader of leaders, and each one of them having their own a course to chart. But it may not. But it is a huge determining factor, something that we look very deeply into, and you spend a lot of time talking not just to the team that the founder has built around them, but to also talk to their previous employers and to understand what kind of a leader the person was even in the old organization. Was he or she somebody that would put their hand up to take on a tough project? Was he or she somebody that would work very closely with their colleagues? Was he somebody that would be looked at as a rainmaker, right? Would he or looked at someone who was available and helpful when required? I think these qualities play a very large role when it comes to deciding the course of a startup and deciding whether we will invest in a company or not. And I'll just add one last point before handing over. I think the decision-making capability of a founder shows a lot of leadership, right? When a founder cannot decide, and I was alluding to it earlier, that if they don't have the ability to listen to many conflicting ideas, because the board might say something, the mentors might say something, the team might say something, the customer might say something, and the VC might say something, and the angels might say something. They have to have the ability to listen to everybody, right? And they must. But at the end of the day, they must decide and look into everyone's biases, and they should do their own research and decide for themselves. Many a time, founders just believe that if there's too many conflicting decisions, let's not make a decision at all. But trust me, that itself is a decision in itself, right? So as a founder, I think there are certain times we also test the founder in by offering. Vinod and I will offer him, conflicting advice, just to see whether, if he's actually going to be able to decide for himself, and it lets us know exactly, where the founder is in terms of maturity. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anirudh. You've very, very beautifully articulated the role of a leader and the tone at the top, and how he needs to assimilate all that he hears, and filters out what's the best, and then implements it accordingly. That's very well done. Thanks a lot for that. We move on to our last question, and that's for our last panelist, and that is for CA Siddharth Pai. The global COVID-19 pandemic has triggered liquidity problems, which may cause a significant reduction in the scale of investment and also reducing the valuations. So in this current situation, who is at an advantage? Is it the investor or the founder? And what is the role of a venture capitalist like you who is bridging the gap between the two? C.S. Siddharth Pai.
Thank you very much, Ravi Shankar. Actually, sir, with all due respect, I actually have an opposing view when it comes to this particular problem. And I would love to actually explain the same as well.
Sure.
The era we live in as of now is not actually characterized by a deficit of liquidity, but by a surplus of it. There are $39 trillion $39 trillion of bonds across the entire world. We're close to about $19 trillion of them actually having negative yields. We've actually gone back to, I would say, the Middle Ages, where people are actually paying bankers for the privilege of actually storing their money just because they're confident that the growth rate's actually going to start tapering out across the entire world. And actually, in this particular scenario that we've seen the Federal Reserve in the US itself actually start cranking the money printer out moment COVID actually happened. There's actually a very funny joke about this that I'm sure that all chartered accountants would also love. That if there was an alien invasion in the world, the US's first response would be to actually lower the interest rates, and India's first response would be to actually defer all the GST filing dates for everyone who's actually involved. So I think that's one of the ways to actually best encapsulate the ethos and the zeitgeist of the era we actually live in. But this heightened amount of liquidity has actually become a double-edged sword for a number of people. So the rest of the world has actually now started chasing growth to a large extent. It's actually reached a stage where it's growth at any cost. If you look at the entire world as of now in terms of the engines of growth, the US has been growing about 1.6% for the longest period of time. And only when Trump actually came up, they actually started going to 2.1%. Now with the COVID pandemic and the Federal Reserve stimulus, also the latest World Bank figures also show that the US GDP growth is actually going to increase for FY22, and then it's going to start tapering down over that itself. We've actually seen that happen. We've seen when it comes to Latin America as a whole, Latin America is still actually trying to recover from some of the excesses of the 90s itself, where there are certain pockets like Argentina and others who have severe macroeconomic stress that's actually preventing them from actually investing back into their own people as well as growing in that particular regard. If you actually look at Europe since the great financial crisis of 2008 has had absolutely dismal growth rates throughout. And those growth rates, in turn, economic growth rates coupled with a declining population, it's actually seeing a conflict of cultures emerging in Europe as well. And Europe especially has a huge deficit when it comes to technology talent as well as homegrown technology startups. A large amount of their best companies or their best products are actually once created by the US and actually been sold and marketed extremely well in Europe. If you actually come towards Australia's had a fantastic growth rate for a very long period of time, of close to about 30 years without seeing any economic downfall. But they are actually having problems now with the largest trading partner, China. And that entire strife in turn is actually going to define the coming decade when it comes to Australia itself. Japan, since I think about the time I was born in the early 90s, Japan's actually had a stagnant economy for the longest period of time. They became the third largest. They've actually stayed around the second or third largest economy in the entire world for close to about 30 odd years. And the chances of them actually coming out of this particular liquidity trap that they're stuck in will actually take a longer period of time itself. We've seen China actually emerge over the last 30 years as one of the most dominant forces in the entire global stage. But there as well, the strife between China and the US is something that's actually going to mark this coming decade going forward. And the ability for China to actually absorb large amounts of global capital and the conscious decoupling of supply chains away from China may actually hurt the growth prospects and investment prospects into China itself. And lastly, when you actually look at the Middle East, also the Middle East itself is actually now gearing. We've actually seen Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, and all of them actually move away from the petrol-based economy into travel and tourism, into technology, as well as other allied fields. So it will take them some amount of time before the guardrails of that are set, before they can start accelerating upon that. You look at Southeast Asia, also the whole of Southeast Asia is roughly equivalent to the size of 2 states in India. We actually take Uttar Pradesh as well as Gujarat into consideration. The population is roughly about that. So India, as you can see, has actually emerged as one of the last bastions of growth that does not have the same kind of policies as what China actually had. It's extremely receptive when it comes to FDI in that particular, as well as foreign investments. And this in turn, we've actually seen a large amount of growth get generated over here, which also brings me to answer the question that you brought up. about the role between the investors and the startups. Startups have actually become the engine of growth for the entire country. The Prime Minister of India has also articulated on multiple occasions the role that startups will actually play in India becoming a $5 trillion economy by the year 2025. Close to 20% of that, or 1 trillion, has to come from the new age economy itself. India's ability to actually weather COVID-19 is done in large part because of the investments that have actually gone into startups that actually deal with digital payments, online e-commerce when it comes to any model of e-commerce, e-pharmacy, the delivery of goods, services, foodstuff, etc., as well as when it comes to actually making payments online. These two in turn have actually helped India maintain some amount of social distancing. And without these business models that have emerged out of startups, it would be extremely hard for them to actually take it forward. And Anirudh can also attest to this, and Mr. Samir Ananda can also attest to this itself. 10 years ago, a massive Series A round in the country was actually about $1 million, $1 to $2 million. As of the year 2019 and 2020, there are companies who are raising their seed round of funding at anywhere between $20 to $25 million. This just shows a large amount of liquidity that's actually chasing growth, and entrepreneurs by themselves are actually the perfect champions of that particular growth. And for those entrepreneurs, in order for them to actually absorb the capital that's coming to them, the trilogy of startup success, as has been articulated by the Doha chapter of the ICAI, will actually become key. The finance and the ability to actually absorb that particular money, manage that particular money, invest it back into your business, and to ensure that there's no adverse leakage that happens in the entire corporation will actually make or break these particular startups. While a large amount of liquidity and investments come to these particular startups, nobody actually does this at charity. Everyone's actually investing at this particular valuation, hoping to make 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 times that amount in the near future itself. And finance in that regard is actually going to play the keystone role in ensuring the translation of the capital that they actually require into revenues and profits that can be shared by all the investors and shareholders. With regard to governance itself, the strongest frameworks of governance need to be baked in at the very early stage for any startup going forward. It is impossible for a bad promoter or for a bad company to actually learn good governance as time actually goes by. Unless these habits are inculcated from day one for these startups, the startups will actually end up suffering. If you look at the US, you look at India, look at China, there are innumerable examples of bad promoters and bad founders that have actually defrauded their investors, defrauded their shareholders when it comes to this. So those best practices in turn will always be inculcated by venture capitalists, and the venture capitalists, a number of VCs have actually become adherent to something known as the UNPRI, United Nations Principle for Responsible Investing, where they've actually taken a pledge only to invest in companies that have a strong ESG framework, and governance actually forms the bedrock of this also. Lastly, with regard to leadership, no investor in the world actually invests with the privilege of actually running a business. The leadership capabilities of the founders, it's not actually tested in the ability to actually raise funding, or the ability to raise funding, or to actually manage the day-to-day operations. Their leadership mettle will actually be tested at times of crisis itself. What is the ability to actually marshal all their employees together? What is the ability to actually take tough calls, either in terms of downsizing or reducing salaries? What is the initiative they actually take to ensure that their employees can actually survive out the hardest time possible? And COVID-19 has actually been the perfect litmus test of that. While a number of startups have actually failed in India, the US, China, Canada, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, any particular geography you can actually think of, I think the lessons that these entrepreneurs have learned as of now are actually going to set the tone for the coming decade itself. So the large amount of liquidity is actually chasing them. We will see what I actually like to call venture inflation. We may not see inflation in the real sense in the real economy in the US, any of the in several other countries, despite all the quantitative easing and the other measures that have been employed by the Reserve Bank and the federal banks and the central banks of all these countries. But venture inflation has actually become real. A large amount of the valuations are extremely ahead of the value creation that these startups actually engineer. That being said, the perspective of the investor is not to actually overvalue that particular startup as of now. They're giving the startup sufficient amount of capital and the ability to actually grow into that particular valuation over a period of time. We've actually seen Indian startups actually crank out close to about 5 unicorns in the past 5 days. We've actually seen that in terms of Grow became the latest one. There was Cred, there was InfraMarket, and there were a number of them that have actually come up. This actually goes to show that Indian startups who've been traditionally conservative when it comes to capital, as well as utilizing that particular capital, are actually attracting the largest amount of investors over the world. But the valuation at the end of the day is not actually the high point of being a startup. Whether you're a $1 billion startup, a $10 billion startup, the ability for you to actually generate returns for your shareholders and investors will actually allow you to get into a Hall of Fame of all the startups itself. Otherwise, it's a paper valuation, right? The way the entire valuation metric actually works is the investor values the entire company on the basis of the quantum of capital they're actually putting in. The company does not have the amount of capital that may actually be required, that may actually be evidenced by the investment that's actually gone in as of now. So that being said, I think the dichotomy between, in terms of valuation or in terms of the global liquidity perspective between investors and startups, it's actually a very hard question to actually answer. It's a double-edged sword and can actually swing both ways. With the largest amount of money, capital can actually become one of the most effective modes for a startup, where a startup actually has a very long period of time, provided they can keep their burn low, to actually ensure they can experiment, iterate, and actually go to the market with a fantastic product. They've also been simultaneously, if you actually look at the other on the other side of the equation, because of the flight to quality that COVID-19 is actually engineered, and the large amount of capital is actually being managed by fund managers the world over. The ability of these fund managers to actually take severely bold calls and actually lose a large amount of money is also reducing to a large extent. The largest investor in startups across the entire world has actually reduced itself from making $1 billion plus bets to actually making bets as low as $90 million in that regard. I think everyone on this call knows about which marquee investor I'm actually speaking about. So the global liquidity crisis, this sort of this surplus liquidity floating around the entire system as of now will actually be best navigated by fund managers who can actually sniff out the best deals and actually negotiate on the basis of valuation while constantly feeding in capital for the companies to actually grow. And the ability for these startups who actually embody the trilogy of startup success to actually find these investors, convince them on the basis of their business model, as well as the financials that they've actually prepared, that they can absorb a large amount of money and actually deliver stellar returns to everyone. I think if these two sides of the equation are actually taken strongly into consideration and embodied by these participants going forward, this particular decade, the next 10 years are actually going to be the era of startups for everyone, and the question of entrepreneurship is not going to be a question of if in any single country around the world. It's actually a question of when, because the only way for all of us to get out of this current COVID-19 crisis, as well as to get back with our lives and to actually start creating a larger sense of growth that can actually be enjoyed by all the citizens of our various countries. And that entire mantle will always fall upon the shoulders of entrepreneurs, and there will always be investors behind them to actually back the right entrepreneur in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, C. Siddharth. This was such an excellent, informative session from you. The response covered all the three success factors, and it was very, very thought-provoking. I think you articulated a very, very compelling sort of a response. So, Nirlap, how good are we for time?
Sir, I think with 90 plus people here at 8:45 p.m. Qatar time, we can still have maybe
another 5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, but we got to be aware that in India it's 11 o'clock, 11 plus.
Yeah.
So,
subject to your permission and our esteemed panelists' permission.
Yeah.
No, most of the investors in India actually work on US time, so I think.
Okay, fine. So we've got our answer. So I think let's just take take this forward. This COVID-19 is pretty much impacting all aspects of our life. It would be really interesting for the participants to get some more insight about this most topical issue with respect to startups. Maybe we could just bounce couple of things across a couple of our panelists. The question on the table is, COVID-19 is not only a challenge for existing startups, but also creation of new ones. How would these challenges be addressed? And is there a silver lining in terms of opportunities during these times of crisis? Maybe ask Mr. Inamdar to go first, please. A brief response from you.
Oh, thank you. So, there has been varied kind of impact of COVID-19 on different. The initial was shock and awe, if I might say that. Nobody really knew what is going to happen. Nobody really knew what the hell this COVID-19 is, and everybody was really groping in the dark. So at that point, what became very important is, I think what Siddharth referred to is, how with the leadership and how to convince people to take salary cuts, reduce costs, and so on and so forth. That was the initial response. But as things started to emerge from the dark tunnel, if I might use that term, I have found that there have been at least 3 or 4 of our companies which have really shot up in terms of the opportunities that they could lay their hands on, and the revenue growth has really picked up. I'm not talking now. I'm talking as early as June and July last year. So, there have been companies which are in specific market segments which really picked up very, very well. Of course, the other panelists have mentioned, there are digital payment companies, online, or e-commerce companies and so on, which also did very well. So the response has been varied. And I think one of the key factors has been how, Anurag referred to this, it's very, very important in my opinion, cash management. A lot of us come from corporate backgrounds, and unless you are a CFO or a finance guy in a corporate background, you really don't bother much about cash management. But in a startup situation, very, very important. It's one of the most important things. Somebody said that in COVID times, most of the companies had less than 6 months of cash. And if you suddenly get caught with that kind of thing, it becomes very, very, difficult. So we did have some of the companies who were really struggling for cash. So I think the response has been varied. There have been opportunities. Some companies have thrived. Some companies, have gone through a very, very tough time. And at the end, what I have to say is that the mettle of the leadership has really been tested to the extreme, I think, in those 3 or 4 or 5 months.
Thank you so much, Mr. Namdar. Could we bounce this question off Mr. Anirudh Damani also? Probably your views on the challenges affecting existing startups and in the creation of new ones, and how they could be addressed, and what the silver lining is in all of this.
Thank you. And I mean, a lot of it was already covered by Mr. Namdar, but I'll try to add a few more points, I think, on top. And something that even Siddharth said, right? This was a great litmus test. Every startup or every founder believes that they've created a fantastic company, that they're the best, and they're supposed to believe that. I think that is a very important aspect of starting out. But what COVID really did, and the speed, typically you see recessions, they sort of, you can see them coming, and they're very, very slow in terms of impacting you, but the impact is deep. In this case, you had an event that was so quick, so deep, and so wide, right? I mean, overnight you had you had nobody on the road, right? And startups had to think on their feet. They had to actually show that they were nimble, that they were able to adjust, pivot. All of that had to happen, and you had to do this without being able to meet your team in the office, right? So you had to meet your team virtually and try to turn a ship while not being on, while not sitting in the command center, as you would call it. So I think in that sense, it created opportunities for startups that were prepared. It was created opportunities for founders that were willing to move, and it also washed away the founders. It washed away the companies that were caught at the wrong time, or they were not willing to move, right? If they were not willing to adjust. And I mean, there are some in my own portfolio that thought, that this is just a temporary phenomenon, we're going to be fine. And they continue to burn money, continue to go down the path, and then 3 months later, they've got themselves on the wrong foot, right? And then, and next thing, but there was companies that I've even talked about had less than 6 months of cash. They cut expenses. They gave ESOPs to their employees. They told them to go home and work from the villages or work from the town, so they save money. They're going to give them 30, 40, 50% of the salary that they actually were supposed to get. And those companies are surviving even today. They're actually doing better than what they were doing pre-COVID, and they have more money today than they had with 6 months of capital left at that time, without raising any further rounds of capital, right? And all of this is possible only with the quality of the leadership, only with the quality of the founder, right? And their passion and their willingness to move, right? Because at the end of the day, and this is something that is even on my desk at the office, it says that obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal, right? And if a founder doesn't have the eyes on the final prize, then all these COVID challenges, the 2008 recessions and the recessions in 2014, all of them seem like boulders. But if you know where you want to go, you'll make it happen. And you can separate those founders from the rest because of these events.
So wonderful. Thanks a lot, Mr. Damani. I think it's all about navigating and keeping your ship on course in all of these crisis times. So I think it's touching 9 p.m. and it's about 11:30 in India. I think, shall we just shall we just wrap it up, Nirlap? I think it's about time now, right?
Yeah, I think we can ask any audience question, one or two. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's fine. If we have anything, Devki can help you.
Yeah, I think he did send one, but is there anything else? I just got one question. And then again, it is something that Anirudh brought up actually, and this is to do with something, and like people wanted to know, how could you actually inculcate a quality in a leader of being teachable? How can you actually mold a leader?
Would you like for me to answer that?
Yes, please. Just touch upon it. I think it's more question of getting up, being with him, making sure that he can be taught things. He's not a one show pony sort of a thing.
So you obviously you can't shove teachability down someone's throat, right?
Yes.
You have to show them that, especially, I mean, some part of it, and I would say a majority part of it, comes from the founder or comes from the individual themselves, right? And you can, as a mentor or as an investor or as a board member, only create something when there is something, some foundation there already. So the way, at least the way we have worked with our founders is to ask them, okay, tell us the biggest 3 problems you're facing today, right? And on every single call, once we've had the updates, once we've had the conversations, we've heard them out, tell us the biggest 3 problems you're facing today. And you start working with them on how to solve those problems, right? And opening them up that these problems can get solved and that they should share their problems. And only when they get comfortable sharing their problems will they be open to instruction. So it takes a bit of time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. And I also don't want founders to just be pushovers, right? You don't want that whatever you tell them they're going to follow. That's not the right habits to inculcate as well. So they also need to be able to decide whether the instruction you're giving them is correct or not. And you, as somebody who's giving that instruction, need to be big enough to understand that just because I said it does not mean it's right. They have the opportunity to come back and say no to you. They have the opportunity to go back, do their research, and tell you that, you know what, maybe what you're saying is correct for the way you're looking at it, but I think this is the way I want to go. And you need to be a big enough person, a big enough mentor, a big enough, don't have that big of an ego that you cannot accept a no. And when the founder sees that in you, they automatically become a little bit more malleable. They become a little bit more open because they realize that it's not your way or the highway, right? And I think you have to have those kind of qualities within yourself to be able to lead another founder and inculcate that teachability in them. But again, I'm not saying that you cannot shove it down their throat. There has to be those qualities there. You can only hone them from there on.
I totally understand, and I totally agree with your viewpoint. I think it's something that it's got to be acceptable for the person receiving the advice. He needs to be weighing his options and going with the right one. So I think the point very well made. I think we've had a wonderful session here, very enlightening and enriching discussion in which we've covered the cornerstones that are essential for startups to succeed and to endure. I'm sure the views from our experts would have been extremely informative for our participants and stimulating for them too. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, Mr. Samir Inamdar, CA Anurag Mittal, Mr. Anuruddh Damani, and CA Siddharth Pai. A big round of applause to all our respected panelists. It's been a wonderful learning experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's over to Nirlap.
Yeah, thank you all the esteemed panelists, despite it's very late in India, and thanks to all the members. Now I would like to hand over our Vice Chair to deliver the vote of thanks, please.
Thank you so much, CA Nirlap. The 2 days first ever virtual startup summit 2021 organized by Doha chapter of ICAI has finally come to an end. We would like to give our sincere thanks to our chief guest, His Excellency Dr. Deepak Mittal, Ambassador of India to the State of Qatar, Guest of Honor CA Nihar and Jambusaria, President ICAI, esteemed speaker CA Dheeraj Khandelwal, Central Council Member ICAI, and keynote speaker Sheikh Ahmed Abdullah Al Thani, Director Saraka Holding, for helping and supporting us in conducting the event flawlessly. We would like to give our sincere thanks to all our team speakers for 2 days, CA Rajiv Gupta, Vice President and Group Head Internal Audit Flipkart, CA Shajib Eliakat, Managing Partner Kristen, SVP Chartered Accountant, Mr. Varun Sridhar, CEO Paytm Money, Mr. Ghanim Al-Suleti, founder and CEO Inbaat Holding Qatar, Mr. Anirudh A. Damani, founder and managing partner Artha Venture Fund, who have helped our members and the audience through their insightful, motivating, and inspiring sessions on the startups. We would like to give our sincere thanks to our moderator for the panel discussion, CA Ravi Shankar, Finance Director, Qatar Rail, and to our panelist, CA Siddharth Pai, co-founder and CFO, 314 Capital, CA Anurag Mittal, Deputy CFO, Snapdeal, Mr. Samir Inamdar, CEO, co-founder, Managing Director, and CEO, Forum Synergies, Mr. Anirudh A. Damani, founder and managing partner, Artha Venture Fund, by bringing the new flavor in the Startup Summit by the way of the panel discussion. Sponsors are definitely the backbone for any event, so we would like to thank our event sponsor, Solution ERP, annual gold sponsor, Mauritian Menon Chartered Accountants and partner, Esther Medical Center, Protiviti ENY, and our annual silver sponsor, Kristen SVP, KPMG, Oracle, Focus, for supporting us in conducting the first ever virtual startup summit. A very special thanks to our ever smiling, innovative, and creative chairperson, CA Nirlab Bhatt, for bringing out such innovative idea for the first time in the chapter history. And sincere thanks to our entire ExCom who were working behind the scene to change the idea into the reality. Last but not the least, thanks to all to our members who have supported the chapter in the good or bad times by their active participation in all the event in spite of their busy schedule. Thanks a lot to each and everyone. Now I'd like to hand over the session to CA Kamlesh to announce the lucky draw winner for tonight. Over to you, CA Kamlesh.
Yeah, thank you, Ankit, and thank you to all the participants who have waited for this moment. So I'll quickly share my screen, and like we did yesterday, we will conduct the. We'll come to know who is the lucky winner for today. Vignesh, we are able to see my screen, right?
Yes, Kamlesh, it's visible.
Yeah, okay, fine. So I'll just go and comment the formula and let's see who is the winner. Shabin S, are you present here? If yes, kindly unmute yourself or type in the chat box.
No, Kamlesh, he isn't here.
No, then I'll move on to the next one. Joby, are you here? I saw some time back he was here.
Yes,
are you
yes,
here?
I'm here. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, congratulations,
Congratulations.
Joby. Thank you. I think your wait has paid off. Thank you very much, members, and look forward to seeing you in our next event. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.